It all starts in a remote mountain village, where a heated argument is taking place. A young man is absolutely furious, demanding answers from an old man right away. He asks if there is an elf in that village because his captain wants to see her, but the elderly man insists he knows absolutely nothing. Annoyed by the answer, the young man shoves the old man to the ground. The villagers watching nearby whisper in fear, noting that the young man is part of a violent gang of outlaws, and wonder where the guards are. A man with a mustache explains that with the Demon King's army on the loose, it is only natural for troublemakers to start popping up everywhere. He goes on to say that noble territories are being raided, and that even a neighboring count's family was completely wiped out in the midst of the chaos. Noticing the whispering, the aggressor turns around in a rage and barks at the crowd, telling them they are not a free entertainment show. While the locals scramble to call the guards as quickly as possible, someone else approaches the scene. The bully raises his fist to strike the old man again, threatening to hurt him even worse if he keeps playing dumb. And just as he is about to lay a hand on the elderly man, at the very last second, someone stops his punch cold. The one who had just arrived was our Prota, who complains about all that annoying noise. Next, he turns to the old man and tells him to get out of there, leaving the attacker in complete shock for having his punch blocked so effortlessly. The bully asks if he wants to play hero, but the boy mentions he overheard they are looking for an elf in the village. The criminal smirks, thinking he is about to squeeze some information out of him, and notes that the boy seems to know something. The Prota states that even if he did know, he would not tell him, and demands to be taken straight to their boss so nobody gets hurt. Oh wow, it looks like our Prota does not mess around. The bully gets extremely irritated by the boy's audacity, barely able to believe what he just heard. He shouts at the boy not to underestimate him and charges forward with everything he has to throw another punch. However, in the blink of an eye, the bully is taken down with just a single punch. Talk about learning from Saitama. Flat on the ground, the bully tries to process what just happened, only remembering seeing a bright flash of light. The Prota dusts off his hands and comments that the guy has some nerve for coming at him like that. Giving him a terrifying glare, the Prota steps closer and asks if they should test just how much pain the attacker can actually take. Inside a secluded cabin, a furious voice bellows, demanding to know why they haven't found the elf yet, ordering them to bring her in immediately. The gang leader slams his hand on the table, outraged that his henchmen were easily defeated by a single kid. He gets lost in thought, highly frustrated by his group's pathetic failure. Suddenly, the door is kicked wide open by the Prota, who walks right in dragging the defeated bully by the collar. The gang leader is left completely speechless, looking like a total fool in front of that grand entrance. The other gang members inside the cabin just stare at the intruder, completely clueless as to what is going on. The Prota asks the guy he dragged along if he brought him to the wrong place, since they do not exactly seem welcome there. With his face entirely swollen, the guy reassures him it is the right place and complains that his actual name is Sigmal. The boy squeezes his head and threatens to give him another beating if he is lying, making the henchman point desperately toward the seated boss. The other thugs draw their weapons and mock Sigmal for getting beaten up by a kid, warning him that the boss is absolutely livid. The Prota glares seriously at the leader, who asks if he is the one responsible for the mess in the village. The boss asks if the boy is the one living with the elf, and mocks his henchman for losing to someone so young. The boy tells him to stop stalling and explain why they are after his sister, and the leader replies that they plan to have some fun with the elf before selling her off. Look at the nerve of this background character. I really hope the Prota knocks his lights out. Annoyed, the boy clenches his teeth, realizing that talking to this group is a total waste of time. At that exact moment, the large wooden door of the cabin begins to shut all by itself. The thugs start laughing, and the leader finds it hilarious that the boy is closing the only exit out of the place. The Prota stands with his back to the closed door, facing every single enemy inside. He reaches for his sword on his back and warns them that he is about to reveal two very important things to them. The leader points at the boy and mocks him, asking if that sword he is carrying is even real. The Prota jams his sword right into the door latch to lock it from the inside for good, while the leader keeps talking. Seeing that display, the leader actually starts getting spooked. The Prota finishes locking everything up and formally introduces himself as Eldmia Ega. The thugs are absolutely terrified when they realize he bent his own iron blade with his bare hands just to jam the door. The leader starts breaking into a cold sweat, realizing the situation has become highly dangerous for them. He screams at his men to charge, insisting the sword must be a fake and that there is no reason to panic. The criminals regain their courage and rush forward all together with their weapons, trying to eliminate the intruder once and for all. While the boss promises the sword as a reward to whoever takes him down, Eldmia simply watches the attack with absolute calm. Eldmia reflects that he initially thought they were just an ordinary gang of rowdy troublemakers, but looking at the frightened young men inside, he realizes the group is even smaller and weaker than he anticipated. A blue aura begins to wrap around his legs as he decides on the best approach to handle the situation. In the blink of an eye, the Prota darts forward at incredible speed, passing right through the thugs before they can even react. The gang leader's eyes widen, completely shocked by the boy's mind-blowing speed. Ega cocks his fist, concentrating his strength to deliver a direct blow to the leader of the pack. He lands a devastating punch right in the boss's face, deciding that taking out the leader first is the smartest strategy. The impact is so intense that the leader loses consciousness instantly from the hit. That is another one shot for our Saitama. A massive cloud of dust kicks up inside the cabin as the man is slammed violently against the floor. The thugs and the young recruits are paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend how their captain was taken down in a single second. Ega walks calmly through the room and says that now he will reveal the second important thing for them to remember. He crosses his arms with authority and begins to speak in a firm, menacing tone. The Proto warns them with a smirk that they should never, ever make Ega angry, asking if everyone in the room got the message. Later on, the sun begins to set over the mountains, casting a warm glow on a cozy wooden cabin. A beautiful blonde-haired elf remarks that the boy ended up getting into another fight before coming home. She asks if he hadn't mentioned earlier that those guys weren't even worth the trouble of dealing with personally. I am really liking this elf lady, guys. The elf's name is Asilia Enderinia, and she asks with a curious gaze if she is wrong in her judgment about the young man. Eldmia gives an awkward laugh and tries to play it off, saying they were just unimportant troublemakers who weren't worth his time. He sighs and explains that the guys were speaking poorly of her, and as her brother, he simply couldn't stand by and watch Asilia smiles, noting that he is only 11 years old but talks like an adult, though she wishes he would stop solving everything with violence. She asks why he took so long to return if it was supposed to be a quick job, and the boy replies that defeating them was fast, but an unexpected issue came up. Eldmia is shown sitting in front of 3 boys who have their heads lowered, discovering that they are runaways. He pinches the cheek of one of them and complains that instead of outlaws, they are just runaways causing trouble, making the boy apologize over and over. The Proto tells the group to beat it, and the boys run off in a hurry, while desperately thanking him for his help. He then turns to the other children left behind and asks if they aren't going back home either. With sad faces, the children timidly explain that they don't have any home or family to go back to. Seeing their situation, the young man realizes that this group is actually made of real orphans who desperately need help. He scratches his head, realizing he has no choice but to find a way to help them out somehow. He tells Asilia that he was late because he was busy looking for a home for them, as seeing children without a family reminded him of his own past. The boy says he is incredibly lucky to have his sister by his side to support him. He goes on to say that those children just need an opportunity in life, and that he wanted to give them that chance. Shyly, he gives a silly smile and confesses that saying all of that out loud is a bit embarrassing. Suddenly, Asilia leaps on him with a tight hug, praising her little brother for his wonderful attitude. The two lie down on the wooden floor, and the elf mentions that 3 years have already passed since the day they met. She says she never imagined they would live such a peaceful life, and that this life feels like a dream come true. The boy becomes thoughtful, wondering what would have happened to them if they hadn't run into each other that day. He slowly closes his eyes as he begins to remember how everything started in the past. His memory takes him back to the day he crossed paths with Asilia for the very first time years ago. Little Eldmia was running desperately, completely exhausted, while holding a sword with both hands. Meanwhile, Asilia was completely bound by chains on her hands and wore an iron collar around her neck, totally spent. Our Proto lets go of his sword and falls to his knees, completely drained of strength. The chained elf slowly walks toward him while the boy continues to groan in pain on the ground. On that tragic day, 3 years ago, the village was completely destroyed, and the boy had lost everything he had. Desperate, Asilia was running aimlessly, trying to escape her captors with all her might. Armed men shouted in the distance, warning that she went that way and ordering everyone to search for the runaway elf. The mercenaries combed through the ruins of the destroyed village, letting the boss know she hadn't been found around there yet. One of the bandits violently kicks open the door of an abandoned house to search inside. The furious leader barks at his men, reminding them how much that elf is worth, and threatens to end them if they let her slip away. Meanwhile, a dark-haired boy with a pendant around his neck remains hidden in absolute silence. The young boy holds dearly onto a pendant that holds the photo of a beautiful, smiling woman. However, a mercenary suddenly appears and violently rips the necklace right off the boy's neck. He shoves the boy to the ground, saying the necklace won't do him any good in the afterlife, and reports to the boss that the elf mage vanished without a trace. The boss screams, calling the henchman a fool, explaining that he placed a sealing collar on the elf to stop her from using magic, and running far away. Hiding nearby, Asilia trembles with fear as she hears the mercenaries closing in, thinking desperately that she needs to find a safe hiding spot. She then breaks into a run and quickly dashes into a house. Inside, she breathes a sigh of relief for not being spotted yet, but wonders anxiously what she should do next. Suddenly, she hears a noise very close by, and the person who was there was our Proto. He was terrified and was also looking for a place to hide. Given the circumstances, the two were highly cautious around one another. Outside, the leader grows annoyed with the delay and decides to use a special tracking magic to solve the issue. Instantly, Asilia feels the collar glow and tighten around her neck, letting out a gasp of pure pain. She screams in agony as the restriction magic begins to intensely torture her. Hearing the scream coming from inside the cabin, the mercenaries rush over, shouting that they finally found her. One of the bandits approaches the elf, fallen on the ground, and complains about all the trouble she caused the crew. "Get your hands off my elf, you creep." The boss celebrates having recovered the elf and orders his henchmen to steal everything of value in the village before they leave. As she is being taken away, Asura looks back worriedly, hoping that the little blue-haired boy will be okay. She remembers locking the boy in the closet in a hurry, praying that nobody finds him until the bandits leave. But the mercenaries suddenly hear a strange noise coming from right inside the cabin where the elf had been hiding. The bandits are surprised to see a little boy stumbling out with a massive sword in his hands. Little Eldmia shakes from head to toe in pure terror upon facing the armed men. Seeing this, Asura panics as she watches the boy step out of hiding, knowing he is in grave danger right now. The boss realizes the boy is a survivor of the attack and orders them to capture him too, since he could be sold for a good price. The henchman draws his sword in front of the boy and says he is out of luck for crossing their path, telling him to surrender peacefully. Crying heavily, little Eldmia says he doesn't want to go because his parents are still in the destroyed village. The mercenaries burst out laughing hysterically at the boy's innocence, calling him a complete idiot. With a cruel grin, the man decides to tell the naive boy the awful truth about what happened there. He coldly reveals that the Demon King's army attacked the entire village and wiped out every single resident living there. The boy stands frozen with wide eyes upon hearing that absolutely everyone was taken away. The man says that from today on, they will be the boy's new masters. However, our prota swiftly strikes him down, and following that attack, the man was completely defeated. The other criminals panic when they see their companion collapse, yelling at everyone to grab their weapons immediately. They stare at the little boy, completely unable to grasp what he just did. "Looks like our prota was a beast even as a kid." The boy points the tip of his sword at the ground, releasing an intense energy all around him. Actually, that wasn't quite the case. Eldmia could barely hold his sword and doesn't understand how it started moving on its own, as if it had a life of its own. The bandits back away in fear and begin to wonder if that mysterious weapon is actually a demonic sword. One of them remembers that since the village was raided by the enemy army, it makes sense that such a valuable weapon would be left behind. Seeing that his henchmen were spooked, the boss points his sword at one of the thugs and orders him to go over there and take the sword from the boy by force. Realizing their boss might end them if they don't comply, they all charge at the boy at once. Asura tries to reach out as far as she can and screams in desperation for the boy to run away immediately. The criminal carrying an axe advances with a manic grin, confident he will take the boy down easily. But before he can even swing his axe, a beam of blue light cuts through the air, leaving him totally shocked. In a swift and precise motion, Eldmia passes right through, slicing the attacker in half with an incredibly powerful blow. The boy slides skillfully across the ground and delivers another lethal strike against the next opponent. With his eyes glowing completely blue, he prepares to face the rest of the enemy group. The mercenary leader starts breaking into a cold sweat, wondering desperately who on earth this monster of a kid is. Eldmia delivers a precise strike to his opponent, leaving him heavily wounded, while the crew keeps wondering if that really is a demonic sword. Asura watches the scene in absolute shock and instantly realizes that it isn't actually a magic weapon. Suddenly, the boss screams at the top of his lungs, ordering the boy not to take another single step from where he stands. He takes Asura hostage with a sword at her neck, threatening to take her head off if the boy moves. "Keep your hands off our waifu, you scumbag!" She tries to shout at the boy not to listen to the threats, but the leader cuts her off by roughly covering her mouth. The criminal thinks mockingly that he would never actually hurt the elf, since she is far too valuable of a merchandise to ruin. He plans to eliminate little Eldmia the moment he gets his hands on the supposed demonic sword. The boss tries to pressure the prota, saying that the person who saved his life is about to lose hers because of him. He orders the boy to hand over the weapon immediately if he wants to spare the elf, but Eldmia simply extends his arm calmly. Instead of handing over the sword, the boy simply tosses the weapon high into the air, catching the leader's attention. Dazzled by the supposed demonic sword, the criminal shoves Asura to the ground and gets ready to grab the item mid-air. The boss dashes forward excitedly, thinking about how foolish the boy was to give up such a valuable weapon like that. He leaps up laughing with joy, certain that the elf and all the group's riches will finally be his. However, Eldmia appears in the air in the blink of an eye and reclaims the sword, revealing it was never demonic right before striking. With the battle over, the young boy sits exhausted on the ground in the midst of the defeated enemies. He lets out a long sigh of relief for managing to survive all that madness. The little guy vents his frustration about going through so many dangers at just 8 years old, suffering from attacks by the enemy army and bandits. While the boy complains about his terrible luck, Asura watches him, completely amazed by his incredible strength and determination. She realizes that he convinced the criminals the sword was magical purely by using his raw combat skills. The enemy got completely distracted by greed and fell right into the trap the boy had set. She concludes that the boy's strength, intelligence, and tactical judgment are far beyond what is expected of an ordinary child, faced with all that destruction. The elf wonders contextually who this mysterious blue-haired boy really is. She slowly walks up to him and timidly asks why the young man risked everything to save her. The boy stands up and calmly responds that he didn't actually act with the intention of saving her. He explains that this is his homeland and that he simply couldn't sit back and watch bandits destroy everything. Next, the young man surprises her by asking if she really is a true mage. He mentions that he heard the thugs talking about her magical powers before the confrontation started. A bit shyly, the elf confirms that he is right and that she does indeed possess magical abilities. With a hopeful smile on his face, little Eldmia mutters happily that the gods must truly exist. He then extends his hand holding a glowing blue energy sphere and proposes a deal to the elf. Seeing the magical artifact glowing in his hand, Asilia's eyes widen, extremely startled by the situation. The boy offers to free her from the magical collar if she agrees to fulfill a deal for the next 8 years. He asks if the elf accepts living by his side and accompanying him on his journey until he finally becomes an adult. Whoever wants an elf too, just like and comment and I'll ship one over. The little guy explains sadly that at the moment he has no parents or anyone close to look after him. He says it is impossible to keep living in the destroyed village with winter coming, and that he desperately wants to survive. The young man shows great determination in his eyes, but is suddenly interrupted by someone shouting his name. Eldmia snaps out of his memories in the present day upon hearing someone calling out to him in the middle of the busy village. A young man catches him by surprise from behind playfully, asking why he is so distracted in the middle of the day. He mentions hearing about the scuffle with the kids and the lecture the prota got from his elf sister later on. The friend explains that the gang was growing and becoming a real headache, and that it was highly satisfying to watch Eldmia take them down. Eldmia says he doesn't exactly feel flattered, but the guy reassures him that thanks to his deed, all the residents can now live in peace. Next, the friend reaches out and hands the boy a large, very juicy red apple as a token of appreciation. He smiles warmly, emphasizing that the fruit is a special gift of gratitude for everything Eldmia did for the village, but the stall owner shouts, complaining that the young man gave away his merchandise without permission, sparking a funny argument. Eldmia gives a little smirk and thinks to himself that his friend shouldn't be bragging about giving gifts using other people's stuff. Suddenly, he hears an anxious voice calling out to him and turns around quickly with a highly alert look. The dark-haired boy Eldmia helped earlier comes running toward him. Crying heavily, Eldmia immediately recognizes the boy as one of the frightened orphans he saved the day before. He asks if something serious happened, and the boy tries to catch his breath to explain the emergency situation. Desperate, he shares that highly suspicious men raided the place where they were staying to kidnap all the children. Eldmia's eyes widen, extremely surprised to hear the news of his new orphan friends being kidnapped. He reflects that days of peace can vanish like a mirage, giving way to the clashing of swords and the smell of burning wood. The prota remembers that as much as he wants to forget those terrible memories, it is simply impossible. The feeling of helplessness from losing everything in a single second without being able to do a thing still deeply haunts him. This is the cruel reality of the weak, but Ogwyn became his second home after the tragedy that occurred 3 years ago. And above all, the elf Asilia ended up becoming the most precious and important person in his entire life. He clenches his fist in pure anger, determined not to let anyone take away their peace ever again. The young man is infuriated by the threat and demands to know immediately where the criminals who dared to invade the village are. In another part of the village, the kidnappers surround a red-haired girl, telling her to shut her mouth and come along without resisting. She tries to defend herself and shouts, demanding to know the identity of the criminals and why they are acting this way. The bandits mock her questions and insist she just needs to obey and follow them in silence. A hooded man and his henchmen converse in the background, analyzing if the red-haired girl actually meets the boss's requirements. She notices the physical traits they mention and realizes, frightened, that they are no ordinary kidnappers. The hooded man reassures them that he will hand over the payment as soon as the reward is confirmed, ordering the henchmen to take the young girl away immediately. One of the bandits grabs the girl's arm by force, while she tries to break free desperately. Suddenly, Eldmia comes sprinting in and lands a brutal flying kick that sends the kidnapper flying away. The hooded man steps back in fear, highly surprised by the sudden appearance of that mysterious boy. Upon seeing her savior, the young red-haired girl cracks a relieved smile and calls out Eldmia's name. The villain demands to know who the kid is, but Eldmia, stepping right on the defeated henchman, replies that that is his line. With an extremely serious gaze, the prota coldly asks what that group is doing in the village. The hooded man gets annoyed for not knowing she had a guard, while Eldmia comments that people truly love to underestimate him. The other henchman charges forward in a rage to attack the boy, screaming about who he thinks he is. Without any effort, Eldmia knocks out both henchmen and demands the hooded man reveal their plan right away. The hooded man laments trusting such useless lackeys in size. Annoyed by the embarrassing situation, Eldmia warns that messing with the girl he saved is the same as declaring war on him, telling the enemy to stop talking and fight. The Proto makes a provocative hand gesture and tells the mysterious man to try and defeat him first. Furious at the boy's audacity, the man draws his dagger at lightning speed and tells him not to get cocky. He delivers a grazing strike, but the young man dodges with surgical precision without showing any sign of exhaustion. The swordsman gets startled upon realizing the boy managed to dodge his rapid attack so easily. While the opponent is shocked to have his strike avoided by a child, Eldmia prepares a devastating counterattack. However, instead of a regular punch, Eldmia uses a quick tactic and throws a handful of sand right into the villain's eyes. The swordsman stumbles, covering his face in pain. Completely unable to grasp the exact moment the boy used that dirty trick, he curses in anger, realizing he is completely blinded temporarily due to the sand in his eyes. Taking advantage of the distraction, Eldmia lands a beautiful punch straight to the jaw of his helpless opponent. With the force of the blow, the gray-haired man is thrown backward and falls heavily to the ground. Eldmia taunts him, saying his skills weren't all that impressive, and demands he spill every single detail of his plans. The defeated warrior grinds his teeth in pure rage and insults him for being bested by a child. He screams with an insane look that he will kill the Proto no matter what because of this humiliation. But before he can do anything, he hears the sound of footsteps and voices of villagers approaching the location. Seeing that the guard and the village residents are arriving to help, the criminal realizes he no longer has a chance to win. Unwilling to accept being delayed by Eldmia, he snatches a mysterious object from inside his dark cloak. A massive cloud of gray smoke explodes, covering the entire area and startling the people around. The Proto begins to cough in the midst of the thick smoke, while the young red-haired girl runs over to check if he is okay. As soon as the dust settles, Eldmia notices with frustration that the mysterious hooded man managed to escape. He turns to one of the fallen henchmen and remarks ironically that they were completely abandoned by their boss. With a terrifying look, the Proto cracks his knuckles and orders the criminal to spill everything he knows about the runaway. The henchman drops to his knees begging for mercy, confessing they only followed orders to lure the red-haired girl into the forest. Eldmia gets quite confused and asks what on earth he means by that nobility story. The man explains that a rumor is going around that a young noble girl from an important family destroyed in the war is still alive. He begs, saying the reward is massive, but Eldmia says he doesn't care about rumors and demands to know the real identity of the runaway. Eldmia sighs, realizing the thug isn't lying, while the man trembles, claiming they are innocent. The Proto ties up both accomplices and states he won't leave kidnappers loose, noting he will leave the rest to the guard. He extends his hand to help the red-haired girl up and asks affectionately if she ended up getting hurt. She thanks Eldmia and remarks contextually that it is terrifying to think dangerous people like that are walking around. The young man advises her to head straight to the inn to rest, reflecting on how dangerous the village of Ogwen is getting lately. The red-haired girl watches him walk away in silence with a confused and thoughtful look. Upon entering the inn, Eldmia is surprised and wonders what is going on in there. The place is extremely busy and clean, making the boy wonder if that really is the same Alicia Inn from before the orphans surround the red-haired girl named Revi to find out if she is okay, and she shares with relief that Eldmia saved her from the kidnappers. One of the little boys asks for Revi's help with the chores because they received a ton of work and are short-staffed at the moment. Revi organizes the paperwork and resolves the issue quickly, demonstrating an incredible decision-making ability that impresses Eldmia himself. The owner of the inn, Alicia, appears with a massive smile and cheerfully greets the young Proto. For his visit, Alicia playfully comments that she heard about him teaching troublemakers a lesson again, and he responds that it was no big deal. She remembers that the boy brought the orphan children to the inn just a very short time ago. The owner of the establishment praises the young man for making them work so well and livening up the inn, but he reassures her he did absolutely nothing for that. Faced with Alicia's doubt about who organized everything, Eldmia points straight at Revi and says she is the one truly responsible. The woman explains that when she mentioned she wanted to expand the business, everyone started working hard with Revi as the group leader. Alicia praises the girl, saying she learns very quickly, organized the accounting books, and even redid the inn's menu. Curious about this information, Eldmia places his hand on his chin and asks Alicia if Revi really knows how to read and write that well. Alicia agrees that this is unusual for her age and confirms that the red-haired girl has total mastery over reading and writing. She adds that Revi's handwriting and grammar are flawless, far superior to her own, which makes Eldmia recall the rumor he connects everything to the rumor he heard from the henchman about the young noble girl from a ruined war family who was supposedly alive and hiding. Suddenly, Revi hears a strange sound coming from behind and turns around intrigued to see what it is. She gets quite startled to feel Eldmia's firm hand suddenly rest on her shoulder from behind. The boy asks in a serious manner if she knows who the hooded man is and why she referred to those men as dangerous. Revi blushes and tries to look away nervously, stammering that she knows nothing and asking him to let her go. Without listening to her excuses, Eldmia firmly holds her hand and tells the young girl to come with him to talk in a private spot. Revi's eyes widen, and she is left completely breathless by the boy's sudden and firm attitude. He pulls her into an empty room and shuts the wooden door firmly to ensure total privacy. Alone with him, she feels her heart race and wonders if she is still shaken up by the kidnapping from earlier. She remembers feeling the exact same sensation before and admits to herself that she thought Elmia looked pretty incredible fighting. She gets quite embarrassed by her own romantic thoughts about the boy and bites her lips. While Revi tries to shake those romantic thoughts out of her head, Eldmia calls her name in a slow, serious tone. Totally flustered, she panics and asks him to give her some time, saying she isn't mentally prepared yet. The boy is left completely confused by her freakout and says he only wants to ask an important question to clear things up. He takes a step forward and asks directly if she is the missing young noble girl everyone has been talking about. Eldmia explains that this revelation would perfectly justify why those kidnappers were after her. He repeats the exact words of the thug regarding the surviving noble from an influential lineage that was wiped out. Questions what his proof is for believing criminals, but Eldmia counters by saying the evidence is just too obvious. The Prota begins to list Revi's actions, like expanding the inn and securing jobs for the other orphans. He adds that she was perfectly capable of managing all the paperwork and accounting for the busy business. The young man asserts that an ordinary orphan would never know how to do all of that if they hadn't received an excellent education since childhood. Trapped by the young man's logical arguments, Revi tries to stammer, saying everything is just a huge coincidence. Eldmia says he understands she must have her own reasons for hiding the truth, but insists that now he needs to know the whole story. He explains that he needs to know everything to prevent further kidnapping attempts from happening in the future. Revi apologizes, saying she still can't talk, and Eldmia decides not to press her any further, but warns her he won't just drop the matter. Spooked by his statement, the red-haired girl asks worriedly what the young man intends to do next. He reveals that the criminals met up with the hooded man in the forest, and that he plans to go straight to their hideout to finish off the gang. She is shocked by his boldness and asks if he is seriously planning to face all those dangerous enemies entirely on his own. Eldmia tells her to stay hidden at the inn and reassures her he will be back soon. While Revi warns him that the main pack is far stronger than the regular henchmen, Revi warns that those kidnappers are part of a powerful organization of assassins operating in the shadows. Even so, the Prota says he cannot ignore kidnappers operating right in the middle of the village and that he will protect his friends from these lowlifes. Revi apologizes very sadly, saying it is all her fault, but Eldmia asks why on earth she is apologizing affectionately. He places his hand on her head and tells the girl to stop blaming herself for what happened. He states firmly that the only guilty parties there are the criminals who tried to kidnap children in broad daylight. The red-haired girl blushes slightly upon receiving the head pat from the young man, who tells her not to worry about the situation anymore. He reassures the young girl that he will find a way to handle the rest of this matter personally. The boy gives a confident smile and says that he is actually much stronger than she thinks. At night, under the light of the full moon, the hooded villain questions one of his henchmen who returned empty-handed. The criminals argue around a campfire in the woods, and one of them complains that everything would have worked out if that kid hadn't interfered. A henchman says that at least they located the girl they were searching for, but the hooded swordsman tells him to shut up in a massive rage. He swears revenge against the Prota for throwing sand in his eyes and says he wants to end him right now no matter what. The other bandit calms him down, reminding him that their superior, Delta, ordered them to stay put and wait so they wouldn't ruin the whole plan. The hooded man scoffs at the warning and threatens him, saying that if they weren't from the same faction, he would have eliminated a piece of trash like him already. Suddenly, everyone in the camp goes on high alert upon hearing a suspicious rustling coming from the surrounding bushes. The pack leader places his hand on the hilt of his sword and orders one of his subordinates to check where the noise came from. The henchman walks over warily with his axe and pushes the bushes aside to see what is hiding in the brush. He reports that there is nobody there and that it must be an animal, but the boss snaps back, saying no beast would get close to the fire. At that exact instant, Eldmia comes crashing down from the trees with his sword engulfed in blue flames, catching the man completely off guard with extreme coldness and millimeter precision. The young man cuts the throat of the first criminal fatally. The other henchman screams in terror as he watches his companion's blood splatter, asking who on earth is attacking their camp. Eldmia lands lightly on the ground with his eyes glowing blue, entirely focused on wiping out the rest of that dangerous group. The hooded leader grinds his teeth and curses, realizing the boy actually tracked them all the way to their woodland hideout. The boss screams, ordering every available man to charge together and assassinate the intruder immediately. The boy swiftly ducks right under a sword swing delivered by one of the kidnappers. He capitalizes on the opening in his opponent's defense to deliver a precise, lethal slash, neutralizing another enemy. Continuing his rapid movement, he spins with his sword and strikes two more enemies at the same time with lethal blows. With an intense blue aura radiating from his body, the young Prota demonstrates that he will show them absolutely no mercy. He slides across the dirt ground and makes a devastating horizontal slash with his weapon from side to side. Moving at high speed, he passes right through the men as they fall lifeless onto the forest floor. The hooded swordsman steps back, shaking with terror as he watches nearly his entire camp get annihilated in a matter of seconds. Eldmia takes a stance and points his glowing blade directly at the leader of the kidnapping group. The man demands to know the identity of this monster of a kid, and Eldmia jokes back, reminding him that he is the coward who ran away earlier. The prota gives a mocking smirk and comments that, in the end, he managed to find the right location of the hideout furious. The leader charges forward, screaming at the boy not to brag, and vows to shut his mouth once and for all. The two blades clash in midair, triggering an explosion of bright sparks and a massive shockwave. But in the middle of the clash, the enemy feels the terrifying physical pressure from the young boy and is left completely shocked. He stares into Eldmia's cold eyes and notices, frightened, that the boy is channeling an immense amount of energy. Unlike demons, humans need to refine magic. Mages turn it into mana, while knights refine it into an aura. The swordsman panics as he sees his weapon crack under the pressure, unable to accept that a kid possesses so much destructive power. The prota raises his glowing weapon and begins to reveal his secret regarding the use of magical energy. He explains that he is capable of using magical power directly in his strikes, without the need to refine it beforehand, with an unyielding attack. Eldmia shatters his opponent's dagger in half and lands a fatal blow that ends the fight. He looks down at the fallen leader and comments ironically on his nerve to think he actually stood a chance at winning. He shrugs, not caring much about the defeated opponent, and begins to walk in another direction. The prota reveals that he intentionally left one of the henchmen alive, who is now trembling with fear, so he can interrogate him. The boy grabs the surviving bandit tightly by the collar, making the man scream desperately for his life. Eldmia threatens him, telling him to answer everything correctly if he doesn't want to suffer, demanding to know who ordered all of this. He tells the henchman to hurry up, because if he gets home too late, his elf sister is definitely going to scold him again. But suddenly, a deafening roar cuts through the night as a massive red dragon terrifyingly emerges right before them. Eldmia leaps backward, startled upon seeing the massive red creature suddenly appear before his eyes. The red creature charges fiercely, destroying everything in its path with overwhelming force. The prota notes that the monster has wings and realizes it is a legendary beast known as a wyvern. He draws his sword, commenting that although he had heard about these beasts before, it is the first time he sees one in person. The boy recalls that wyverns are known for being the fastest transport in the world, but also incredibly expensive to maintain. He concludes that whoever owns a monster of this caliber is no ordinary criminal, and feels relieved for heading over there without hesitation. Suddenly, the young man's eyes widen as he notices something wrong happening right in front of him. He looks around and notices there is another empty carriage in the kidnapper's improvised camp. In the blink of an eye, the prota points his blade directly at the throat of the surviving henchman. Eldmia demands to know where the group's second wyvern is, threatening to end the man's life if he doesn't answer right away. The criminal confesses in terror that their captain, a knight named Delta, just escaped flying away on it. The prota curses, annoyed at being outsmarted by the leader who anticipated his arrival at the camp. He realizes the henchmen were left behind merely as bait to buy time and keep him far away from Revi. Meanwhile, Revi remains unconscious and completely helpless in the hands of her true captors. The villain carries her on his back and gets ready to board the flying wyvern to escape from there. Once and for all, Eldmia bites his lips in anger at himself, realizing he fell easily into the trap they set for him. Revi wakes up startled, feeling tied up, and asks where she is, while Delta coldly asks if she has finally awakened. Looking down, the young red-haired girl goes into a complete panic upon realizing they are flying high in the middle of the sky. The red dragon flies at extreme speed, leaving the village of Ogwen looking smaller and more distant down below. Revi asks frightened if they are flying on a wyvern, and the villain responds that he is taking her to a place worthy of her nobility. She confronts him, reminding him that wyvern knights are the elite of the kingdom, but he reassures her he will use any method necessary to take her. Delta coldly warns her to behave, as it would be a major tragedy if the young noble ended up falling from that height. The monster continues to slice through the clouds under the firm command of the kidnapping knight. Revi thinks anxiously that even when the residents of Ogwen notice she's missing, they could never catch up to a flying wyvern. To her utter despair, the villain cruelly reveals that there is probably no one left alive in the village to notice her absence anyway. She is left in shock upon hearing that they plan to use a bandit raid or a natural disaster as an excuse to annihilate the village. He explains coldly that he despises leaving loose ends that could jeopardize the success of his kidnapping missions. Crying in despair, Revi screams with all her might that young Eldmia will certainly come to rescue her from that monster. Delta scoffs at her hope, asserting that his elite subordinates in the forest are extremely skilled warriors. He adds that no matter how strong the boy is, he is still just a child and has likely already been taken care of by the henchmen. Revi remembers Eldmia's confident smile and deeply regrets failing to convince him not to come. She deeply laments involving the boy in her nobility problems and weeps in silence high up on the wyvern. The knight says she will soon forget everything once she returns to the capital, as the village residents were just unimportant commoners. However, as he speaks, a bright blue glow suddenly emerges in the night sky right above their heads. To everyone's absolute surprise, Eldmia appears diving out of the sky with his glowing sword in hand, ready to strike with a devastating aerial strike. The boy drives his sword straight into the flying wyvern's head, causing a spray of blood. Delta goes into shock, entirely unable to grasp how that child managed to reach them at such a high altitude. The kidnapper is terrified to see that a little boy managed to bring down a giant wyvern with just a single attack. Eldmia pushes off the falling monster's body and charges with everything toward the frightened knight. The two exchange rapid strikes in the air as they fall, starting a tense and balanced sword duel. Eldmia manages to land a solid blow against his opponent, making the knight let out a groan of pain as he gets hit. They continue to trade dangerous blows on top of the wyvern, while the creature plummets in a free fall. Delta wonders if the boy has lost his mind for trying such a reckless attack that could end everyone in the crash. But Eldmia's plan is different, and he delivers a precise strike to cut the straps holding the monster's saddle. The knight starts breaking into a cold sweat as he realizes the intelligence behind the boy's rapid, tactical movements. He looks up and immediately deduces that the young Prota must have an accomplice helping with the rescue. The kidnapper suspects an internal betrayal, thinking the plan is to distract him to steal the young noble back. He releases an intense purple energy and warns that Eldmia is a fool for thinking he is weak, like his ordinary henchman. Delta unleashes a sequence of devastating magical attacks. Cornering the boy in midair with energy blades, Eldmia struggles to block the strikes and lets out a grunt of pain upon feeling the immense power of the experienced enemy warrior. Delta praises the boy's strategy and courage for launching a surprise attack, but warns that he is far superior in both aura and combat experience. The villain calls Eldmia a fool for challenging him head-on, while the boy thinks to himself that he needs to wrap this up quickly to land safely with the young girl. The enemy lunges forward, delivering a mortal blow, and screams for the boy to just finish up right here. Suddenly, an extremely bright golden glow emerges in the middle of the confrontation. Illuminating the entire scene, Delta gets completely confused and tries to cover his eyes with his arm to shield himself from that sudden light. He realizes the sun is rising and that Eldmia calculated the head-on attack precisely to use that glare as an opening. The kidnapper admits in thought that he was a fool. Right before being hit by a precise slash from the boy, Eldmia says they don't have time and tells the girl to hold on tight, leaving her completely confused at first. He holds her in his arms, and the two plummet through the air while the young girl screams in absolute terror. The two land safely right on the back of a large winged being that was flying just below to rescue them. The ally celebrates that the plan worked and asks if this means he is entirely cleared of his charges. Rivi thanks the boy for the rescue, but quickly gasps and asks if he is really doing okay. It is at that exact moment that a deep, bloody wound reveals itself on the young Prota's shirt. Eldmia laments in thought for taking a counterattack in that split second, recognizing that the villain's skills were the real deal. The young girl panics and begs him to hang in there and not lose consciousness right then and there. The winged being continues its flight toward the horizon, while the girl's worried scream echoes through the sky. After some time, the young Prota finally opens his eyes and wakes up quite startled. As he sits up in bed, Eldmia wonders where he is and realizes he ended up back in his own home. He looks around in silence, trying to understand exactly what happened while he was out cold. Upon seeing his adopted sister sleeping right beside him, he wonders in thought if she stayed by his side the entire time. Sensing the movement on the bed, the elf begins to wake up slowly and opens her eyes. She jumps up, relieved, and celebrates that her brother has finally managed to wake up. The elf hugs him tightly and complains about how much worry he puts her through, making the boy apologize rather awkwardly. She squeezes him even tighter and confesses she is just incredibly relieved that he made it back safely. Eldmia smiles and returns the warm hug, apologizing once more for leaving his sister so worried. The elf shares that the red-haired girl was also very worried and came to visit him every single day, noting she should arrive soon. Right at that moment, the door opens and the young red-haired girl steps into the room wearing a travel cloak. Rivi runs straight toward Eldmia and hugs him tightly, while the boy says he is glad to see she is doing well. Next, she starts smacking him lightly, calling him an idiot for staying knocked out for 3 days straight. The boy complains that a thank you should come first, but the young red-haired girl replies that now is not the time for that. He notices her clothes and comments that, judging by her look, it seems she finally reunited with the other nobles. Eldmia compliments her, saying she truly looks like a real noble, and the girl responds with a confident smirk. Rivi's expression changes, and she says that things are settled now, but warns that she needs to have a serious talk with him. With a gaze full of anticipation, the young red-haired girl gently holds the Prota's hand. Rivi gathers her courage and asks directly if Eldmia would accept coming along with her to the royal capital. To her surprise, the boy refuses instantly, making the young girl ask him to at least think about it a little. He explains that he appreciates the invitation, but he has a very important goal and needs to get much stronger to achieve it. Ravi suggests that the knights in the capital could teach him how to fight, but the boy responds right away that Asilia is the only master he needs. Eldmia questions if his friend has any clue just how powerful an elf mage can truly be. Revi stays silent for a brief moment and asks what he would do if there were someone even stronger than Asilia. The boy gets confused by the question, while a massive armored figure silently approaches where they are. He laughs at the situation and questions why such an important warrior would waste his own time on someone like him. Suddenly, a massive blonde knight in imposing armor emerges right behind the boy and says he wonders about that too. The young prota's eyes widen as he senses the intimidating presence of that mysterious warrior. He turns around, startled, completely unable to grasp when the man got there. Since he didn't sense any presence at all, Eldmia gets into a defensive stance and asks who he is, but Revi tries to calm him down, saying it's okay. The red-haired girl steps forward and greets the knight respectfully, calling him Sir Ecaf. The man responds that he is immensely happy to see that Lady Lagunas is safe and sound after all the danger she went through. The knight formally introduces himself as the Shield of the Kingdom of Idiciel and reveals her name as the Marchioness of Lagunas. Rienda Revian Eldmia is left completely shocked and open-mouthed to find out his friend is actually a highborn Marchioness. Eldmia recalls that her family's territory is gigantic compared to Ogwen, even after being raided by the Demon King's army. He becomes thoughtful, unable to believe his friend isn't just an ordinary noble, but the daughter of an actual Marquis. Eldmia realizes that the red-haired girl's importance is far greater than all the rumors he had heard before. The mysterious knight with striking eyes closely observes the blue-haired boy Ekaf, addresses the prota directly, and asks if he is young Eldmia. He says it is surprising for someone so young to have defeated Dandel, and asks if it's true that the boy already knows how to use an aura. Eldmia responds quite harshly that that is none of his business, leaving his red-haired friend rather worried. The boy snaps that he doesn't like him, and questions where the knight was when Revi was in so much danger, acting like her protector. Only now Revi interrupts the argument and takes the blame for everything, leaving the young prota completely clueless as to what she means. The imposing warrior explains coldly that this entire situation is a political matter that an outsider like Eldmia shouldn't meddle in. The prota gets extremely irritated by the warrior's statement, but the man quickly continues speaking. The experienced knight asserts that things would be quite different if Eldmia accepted becoming his personal disciple. Revi reveals with a smile that she brought the knight along precisely for that, since he wanted to take him in as a student upon hearing of his deeds. She officially introduces him as the king's third sword, one of the most powerful warriors in the capital, and an old friend of her late father. With a penetrating gaze, Ikaf reveals that he already investigated Eldmia's entire past before coming out here. The knight comments on how the boy went around defeating local criminals across the region while telling everyone not to cross him. He mentions that Eldmia lost his parents to the Demon King's army 3 years ago, and that he seeks strength solely to get his revenge. The boy grinds his teeth in anger when the warrior asks if all this obsession is merely because of the loss of his parents. Unable to take the provocation any longer, Eldmia drives forward and charges at high speed against his opponent. He delivers a strike, screaming that the knight knows nothing, while his friend watches the scene completely terrified. However, the experienced warrior blocks the boy's furious attack using just one of his armored hands. He calmly advises the youth not to let himself get carried away by emotions, as that makes his strikes sloppy and easy to predict. But suddenly, an intense golden energy begins to emanate from the young prota's hand, right over the knight's metal gauntlet. Using the leverage, the boy leaps with everything and delivers a precise kick straight to the side of his opponent's face. The knight shows a hint of surprise upon seeing the audacity and quick thinking of that child. With a swift movement, the powerful warrior releases a heavy blast of energy that throws the boy far back. Despite being thrown backward, Eldmia gives a confident smile upon realizing he managed to land a hit on the great warrior. However, the boy's countenance quickly changes to an expression of pure pain and shock. The experienced warrior wipes his face and acknowledges that the prota's kick really was a good attack. Eldmia collapses sitting on the ground without strength, while the opponent says he would like to test him a bit more. The knight points out that he is in no condition to continue the fight, revealing that the boy's old wound has started bleeding heavily again. Frustrated, Eldmia screams that his title means nothing, if he wasn't there when his friend needed help the most. To the boy's surprise, the man fully agrees, and says that regardless of titles, there are many things they failed to protect. He explains that even at this very moment, people could be crying out for help in some distant place they don't even know. Ekaf places his hand friendlily on the boy's shoulder, and asserts that faced with this, only a single alternative remains. With a firm, determined look, he says the only way to truly save everyone is by completely wiping out the Demon King's army. The man adds that to achieve this goal, they need to gather as many talented warriors like Eldmia as possible. He promises he can make him stronger than anyone else, and invites him to join him as a sword of the kingdom in this great battle. Faced with such an important and decisive proposal for his future, the boy stays completely silent. Later on, Eldmia walks down a beautiful dirt path toward his adopted sister, who is waiting for him peacefully under a tree. He observes her with a serene gaze, appearing to have already made a major decision in his mind. The boy slowly approaches the elf, who is wearing a beautiful white dress, and awaits him in silence. With a gentle, understanding smile on her face, the elf asks directly if he is really leaving. She confesses she already felt this would happen ever since he met the red-haired girl, but didn't imagine the farewell would be so sudden. Eldmia says he will do whatever it takes to get stronger, and asks if his dear sister can understand his side. He thanks her from the bottom of his heart for everything, and asserts that the last 3 years they spent together were more than enough for him. The elf keeps smiling tenderly, demonstrating all the affection and pride she feels for her adopted brother. The boy gets surprised when she affectionately calls him by his childhood nickname. She opens her arms with a radiant smile on her face and asks him to give her a very tight hug before leaving. The young Prota looks at his sister with affection and gets ready to give his final farewell response. The two hug warmly under the tree, sealing that emotional farewell with lots of affection. Shortly after, a carriage travels down a tree-lined road toward the royal capital. Eldmia is now wearing a very nice golden earring on his left ear, which glints under the sunlight. Rivi notices the accessory and curiously asks if he always wore that earring, catching his attention. He explains it was a gift from Asilia, forming part of a traditional elf ritual to ensure a promise is kept. The red-haired girl turns red and asks, stammering, what that promise was. Imagining 1,000 romantic things in her head, Eldmia laughs and says it's a secret, leaving his friend even more curious and complaining inside the carriage. In the distance, Asilia watches their departure from the top of a hill, also wearing the identical earring on her ear. Finally, the carriage arrives at the royal capital and pulls up right in front of the imposing and gigantic Ogator family mansion. In the training yard, a blonde girl finds it unbelievable that her father took in as a disciple the boy who attacked him. She crushes a cloth in anger with her hands and questions what her father was thinking when he made that decision. She firmly grips her practice sword and whispers the Prota's name with a tone of heavy distrust. Cheryl warns herself that she's going to show the new student just how terrifying and powerful the Ogator family can be. Meanwhile, the transport vehicle passes through the estate gates and pulls to a final stop in the main courtyard. Eldmia asks if the country is divided between the king's and the nobles' factions, and Rivi confirms that that was why they tried to kidnap her. She explains that she is the sole survivor of her family, and, being a minor, the nobles wanted to use her as a puppet under the guise of protection. She adds that they plan to use her as a valuable piece in the political conflict against the royalist faction. The boy questions why she didn't ask the royalists for direct help, since her family originally belonged to that exact same side. With a determined look, the girl responds that she herself needs to be in charge of rebuilding her family lineage. Faced with his doubt, Revi smiles and comments that people simply love a good dramatic and impactful story. She explains that if she had just run to beg for help, she would be seen merely as a pitiful survivor of a fallen noble house. The Prota listens closely as she questions the impact of surviving alone and resurfacing at the perfect moment as the rightful heir. She describes the heroic scenario of a marquis's daughter returning from exile to claim her place and swear loyalty to the kingdom once more. The young girl says this would heavily strengthen the royalists' position and would be the ideal plan to win over the entire population's support. Eldmia thinks the idea is smart, but comments that even so, it was something extremely dangerous and reckless to do at her age. Ecaf chimes into the conversation and says he thought the exact same way. But the young noble flatly refused to reveal where she was hiding. She smiles awkwardly and admits she wanted to overcome the difficulties on her own to be a worthy marchioness, but ended up being saved by Eldmia. The boy gives a warm smile and responds that the most important thing of all is that she managed to survive and is now completely safe. Finally, the carriage crosses the main garden and stops right in front of the entrance to the luxurious Ogatorf residence. The experienced knight guides the horses with mastery and lets the passengers know they have just reached their destination. With a soft creak, the carriage's wooden wheels finally stop turning on the courtyard's stone floor. The massive grand house reveals itself in all its imposition, decorated with beautiful columns and stone sculptures on the facade. The driver pulls the horse's reins all at once, stopping the vehicle right in the center of the mansion's main entrance. Eldmia is impressed by the size of the place, while Ravi comments nostalgically on the time that has passed since her last visit there. The girl excitedly asks how young Cheryl is doing, and the father lets out a rather hesitant sigh as he responds that she's doing fine. But with reservations, he begins to explain that lately his daughter entered a bit of a rebellious phase, right when someone approaches stepping firmly outside. The knight adds that she got a bit temperamental, right at the moment the door handle is pulled hard from the outside. Suddenly, the blonde girl swings the door open in one go and glares coldly at the passengers who were inside the vehicle. The blonde girl's expressive purple eyes convey an immediate aura of defiance and heavy determination. Eldmia gets extremely confused by that aggressive reception, while his red-haired friend cracks a very awkward, sheepish smile. Not understanding a single thing about what is happening there, the blue-haired youth directly asks who she is. With lots of anger in her voice, the blonde girl barks, wanting to know if he really is the famous Eldmia everyone has been talking about. The father orders Cheryl to greet their guest first, and she changes her posture instantly to greet Rivi with extreme politeness and reverence. But right after, she points back at Eldmia and challenges him to an immediate duel as punishment for insulting her father. The great warrior smacks his hand on his forehead and lets out a long sigh of despair at his dear daughter's impulsive attitude. Ecaf tries to play it off, saying he was the one who planned the duel to bring them closer, but Eldmia notices from the previous sigh that that's a lie. The Prota shrugs and comments that his body actually feels a bit stiff from spending so much time sitting during the trip. He cracks his knuckles with a confident smile on his face and accepts the challenge with open arms from his new opponent. The two take their positions in the yard with wooden swords in hand, while the others watch the start of the match from afar. Revi asks worriedly if they shouldn't stop them, but Ekaf responds that children learn much faster through physical experience. The knight confesses in thought that, truth be told, nobody can hold Cheryl back when she decides to be stubborn like that. Once the blonde girl gets fixated, she simply refuses to listen to any advice or word from anyone whomsoever Cheryl advances with extreme agility toward the Prota, initiating the first combat movements. Their wooden swords clash with great force, releasing a shockwave from the initial impact. Angrily, she screams that he has a lot of nerve showing up there after insulting her father, telling the boy to pack his bags and go back to his village. Eldmia counters in kind, reminding her it was her own father who invited him to be his disciple, telling her to beat it if she didn't like the idea. The two practice swords keep colliding fiercely under the clear sky of the training yard. The duo exchanges rapid strikes in an intense sequence of precise attacks and defenses from both sides. Cheryl capitalizes on a small opening to deliver a potent, swift vertical strike against the boy. With rapid reflexes, Eldmia leans his upper body back and manages to dodge the attack by a very narrow margin. With a shrewd look, the girl decides that now is the perfect time to put her opponent's true skills to the test. Cheryl presses the attack without giving the boy time to recover, trying to corner him in the contest. She thinks to herself that she already anticipated that dodge from her adversary and plans her next strategic step. Cheryl calculates that by dodging that way, the boy's body would be forced straight to the ground. Believing she has total control of the situation, she unleashes an attack with the certainty that she managed to catch him. She screams that this is the end of the match and brings down her wooden weapon with all the strength she possesses. However, at the very last millisecond, the young Prota's foot moves rapidly to execute an evasive maneuver. From the ground itself, he manages to raise his wooden sword and perfectly block the strike coming from above. The two practice swords remain locked for an instant, creaking under the massive physical pressure of the young warriors. Using an agile movement, Eldmia manages to deliver a grazing strike straight to the girl's waist with his weapon. Cheryl's eyes widen, completely unable to grasp how he managed to counterattack from such a disadvantageous position. The girl wonders in shock how her opponent was capable of moving so fast and gaining an absolute position of advantage. Her eyes express total surprise upon realizing the boy was considerably more astute than she imagined. The duel ends with Eldmia pointing the tip of his sword right toward the face of the disarmed young girl, while complaining about a slight ache. Sheathing the wooden weapon, the Prota asks with a bored tone if she is finally satisfied with the result. Annoyed, Cheryl screams, asking if he's making fun of her and demands he finish the fight properly, but the boy says that if he did that, he'd end her. He clarifies that he never insulted Sir Ecaf and asserts that, above all, he is the one who doesn't want to look like a fool in front of anyone. He explains that he risked everything to get stronger and warns her he has no intention of going back to his village until he hits his grand goal. With a nice smile on his face, Eldmia extends his hand to her in a friendly gesture and says he's looking forward to training together from now on. The blonde girl stares at the Prota's extended hand for a few moments, appearing very confused and not knowing exactly what to do. But instead of accepting the greeting, Cheryl simply slaps the boy's hand away and stubbornly refuses the gesture of friendship. She bets he will run away from there, crying within 3 days, while the Prota complains about her spoiled attitude even after losing the match, watching everything from afar. Revi and Ecaf find the situation amusing and agree that the two are extremely alike for hating to lose. The youth stares at the horizon with determination and warns that Cheryl should just watch, because he will definitely get much stronger soon. Over the following days, the boy's grueling training begins at full steam at the mansion, demanding the absolute maximum of his physical effort. He spends hours doing push-ups on the wooden floor of his new room, entirely focused on honing his bodily endurance. Under the tutelage of the experienced knight Ekaf, Eldmia receives valuable instructions regarding posture and combat in the estate yard. The boy trains exhaustively, delivering sword strikes against wooden dummies, which end up cracking from the impact of his attacks. To further increase his raw strength, he runs through the forest, dragging a massive, heavy boulder tied to his back. Come nightfall, the young Prota simply collapses exhausted on his bed from training so relentlessly throughout the entire day. Time passes quickly in the royal capital, and the green leaves on the trees outside begin to take on reddish autumn hues. With the seasons changing, Cheryl and Eldmia continue to duel intensely under her father's proud, watchful eye. Sweating heavily and increasingly focused, the Prota's reflexes and movements become extremely polished and rapid over time. Soon, the harsh winter arrives in the region, covering the tree branches with a beautiful, thick layer of white snow. Even in the extreme cold, Eldmia trains barefoot over the accumulated snow, concentrating a subtle, glowing blue aura into his feet. Shirtless in the midst of the forest snowstorm, the boy demonstrates an incredible physical evolution and total control over his energy. He takes a deep breath amidst the icy wind, keeping his mind entirely focused on his goal of getting as strong as possible. Eventually, the harsh winter goes away and gives way to spring, bringing new green buds to the mansion's trees. Little flowers begin to bloom on the branches under the sunlight, indicating that a new cycle and a new year are beginning. And the determined Prota's incessant training continues without pause, showing that he won't rest for anything in this world. The boy keeps doing his daily push-ups on his bedroom floor when Cheryl shouts for him to hurry up already. She opens the door complaining about his habit of training non-stop, while he angrily demands that she knock on the door before entering. The blonde girl tells him to get ready fast before the best guild missions run out, and he agrees with a bit of impatience. Now sporting an incredibly defined physique, the young Prota lets her know he's almost ready and asks for a second. In another location, deep inside a dense forest, stands a rustic wooden cabin that appears to serve as a hideout. Inside the place, a man holds a bag full of glittering gold coins and celebrates with massive enthusiasm. The bandit boss relaxes in his chair, while a henchman proudly reports that the robbery this time was a true success. He laughs out loud, asserting that it was truly worth heading near the capital, where vulnerable rich folks walk around everywhere. The leader plans to make just 2 more raids before moving on, knowing that the Adventurers Guild will soon start acting against them. The bandit chuckles loudly, commenting on how much he loves the job, since it's enough to threaten people so they hand over all their gold begging for their lives. The boss says in a mocking tone that he never promised to leave them alive, while a mysterious voice from the shadows calls him scum. She steps forward, criticizing the fact that they rob others and still have the audacity to brag about it with so much pride. In the blink of an eye, Cheryl appears right behind the bandit boss with a sharp sword pressed straight against his neck. Terrified and breaking into a cold sweat, the criminal leader screams. Unable to grasp how and when that intruder managed to enter, the henchmen yell for their boss and furiously question if the invader is some adventurer sent to complete a guild mission. She tells everyone to shut their mouths and shouts for Eldmia, confirming that those are the targets and that they should finish them off quickly. Realizing she isn't alone, the bandits panic and order all doors and windows of the place to be shut immediately. Cheryl grows visibly impatient with the delay and complains out loud for her partner to hurry up once and for all. One of the criminals wonders where she is looking, failing to notice that Eldmia is observing them from above, crouching on a ceiling beam. The bandit notices the presence on the ceiling and widens his eyes in terror as he realizes the dreadful danger coming from above. The young Prota plummets from above, delivering an extremely rapid sword slash against his adversaries. The other criminals scream in complete despair upon watching their companion get defeated right before their eyes so quickly. Like a true phantom, Eldmia moves at high speed through the hall, defeating multiple enemies with precise slashes. A massive bandit tries to attack him from behind, screaming for him to die, but the Prota doesn't even bat an eye at the charge. With a slight, precise movement of his feet on the wooden floor, the young warrior easily dodges the path of the attack. Next, he connects a spectacular kick straight to the giant's chin, knocking the opponent out with ease. Covered by his travel cloak, the Prota displays a serene, focused gaze amidst all the chaos of battle. He finishes off the last enemy standing with a devastating horizontal blow that puts an immediate end to the bandit group's resistance. Seeing his entire pack defeated in seconds, the boss cringes on the floor and weeps in terror, begging for mercy. The entire cabin falls silent with the bodies of the criminals strewn across the floor, leaving only Eldmia and Cheryl victorious. The surviving leader weeps pathetically, desperately begging the young adventurers to spare his life. He promises to hand over all the money and treasures they accumulated up to that point, while Cheryl glares at him with deep disgust and contempt. Eldmia cracks his knuckles and coldly tells the man to relax, because a piece of trash like him isn't even worth the effort to eliminate. The boss celebrates thinking he saved himself, but Eldmia explains that he needs living prisoners to serve as proof for the guild. However, he warns that in exchange, he's going to give the bandit an unforgettable beating, so he never dares to rob anyone again. With a terrifying, intimidating smile on his face, the boy warns that the man will never forget the name Eldmia Ega. Desperate screams of pain echo from inside the cabin in the middle of the forest as the criminal receives his well-deserved lesson. Later on, the two return to the busy, imposing Adventurers Guild headquarters located in the heart of the royal capital. The friendly receptionist confirms the completion of the elimination mission and hands over the monetary reward to the young heroes. Eldmia holds the bag of coins with a friendly smile and expresses thanks for the reward of the successful job. Eldmia notes it's already time to head out and asks what she is looking at, and the girl responds that she's searching for a mission for the next day. Eldmia reminds her that academy classes start the next day, but Cheryl reveals that collective holidays begin tomorrow itself. He takes the paper and notices it's another elimination request, commenting that lately many similar cases have popped up. Cheryl explains that it's a large-scale mission for 60 people in the West, at a vineyard that is a full day's journey from there. The boy questions if her father won't complain, but she reassures him with a mischievous smile that she already has an excellent idea in mind. Eldmia immediately guesses that her idea involves blackmail, recalling how she convinced her father by threatening to follow him all the way to the war. While the two talk on the street, a mysterious dark silhouette closely observes them from a higher floor window. From the inside, the informant asks the guild master if that blue-haired youth down there really is the target in question. The master confirms and reports that he is a rookie adventurer of great prominence, who burst onto the scene like a bright meteor a year ago. He adds with a smile that the lad ruthlessly crushes any opponent, being widely known by the nickname Mad Dog. The mysterious hooded informant asserts that the boy's skills are truly exceptional, leaving his interlocutor thoughtful. A close-up reveals the guild master's sharp gaze as he processes that important information regarding the Prota. As he walks, Eldmia gives a little smirk upon remembering the peculiar Mad Dog nickname people have been giving him. 2 days later, at the vineyard on the outskirts of the royal capital, a large number of adventurers gathers for the suppression mission. Cheryl asks if that man up ahead is the client who hired the mission, and Eldmia questions who exactly she is talking about. She points to the grumpy man with crossed arms, identifying him as Baron Papayera, who is said to have bought his noble title. The boy finds it curious that someone can simply buy a noble title with money and keeps observing the man attentively. The plump mission organizer celebrates everyone's arrival and asks for the adventurer's attention to explain the operation's details. He points toward the forest and reveals that around 20 heavily armed bandits are hiding in some ruins in that direction. The organizer proposes a simple strategy of forming a line to surround the forest and advancing all at once. When he gives the signal, Eldmia gets highly suspicious of that amateur tactic of advancing in a straight line without any kind of cover. He thinks it's foolish to organize such an exposed frontal charge in an area entirely open and cleared, like that one. Other warriors also complain furiously, questioning how they can simply advance without knowing what the enemies are planning to do. Cheryl calls her partner discreetly in a whisper, and Eldmia agrees right away, confirming the two are thinking the exact same thing. The young Prota stares at Baron Papayera and senses that the noble is certainly plotting something highly suspicious behind all of that. The man tries to calm down the revolted adventurers, explaining that that was merely a suggested plan and not an absolute order from him. He adds that the Baron wants to resolve the problem fast and flatters those present, saying ordinary bandits are no match for them. With a greedy smile, the organizer announces that the Baron prepared an irresistible, highly advantageous offer for all present. He promises an extra reward of 5 silver coins for the brave souls who advance first, leaving the group quite rowdy. Attracted by the high value of the offer, some adventurers start breaking into a cold sweat of anxiety and gripping the hilts of their swords tightly. The pack of warriors quickly gets excited and shouts that they will finish off the bandits immediately in the name of the Baron's honor. The middleman cracks a sinister, extremely fake smile upon seeing that the adventurers' greed led them exactly where he wanted. Eldmia observes that suspicious reaction and grows even more distrustful of the real intentions behind this sudden financial bonus. Eldmia lets him know they are going to act on their own, since they don't need that extra money, leaving the man in complete panic. With a teasing tone, the boy calmly asks if there is some kind of problem or hindrance to them acting independently. Breaking into a cold sweat from nervousness, the man stammers, trying to play it off, and says it's not quite like that, but fails to find a convincing excuse. His tense face covered in cold sweat immediately gives away that he is hiding a very serious secret from the adventurer duo. The man looks discreetly in Baron Papayera's direction to see what his next move should be given the boy's refusal. Creepy. Baron averts his eyes with a cold, calculating look, pretending he isn't paying attention to their conversation. Left with no other choice, the middleman forces a sheepish smile and consents, allowing the duo to act entirely independently. But even before he finished speaking, the two youths had already turned their backs and headed toward the dense brush. Cheryl comments that the recommended frontal charge seems very bizarre, and Eldmia confirms without beating around the bush that it's a trap. He wonders what the Baron's true objective would be with all of that, certain that the noble is plotting something very dark. The blonde girl adds that whatever the intention behind the farce, the current situation is extremely dangerous for those involved. She concludes seriously, asserting that if nothing is done, every single one of those greedy adventurers will end up perishing in the forest. Sunlight filters through the forest canopy, which hides deadly dangers behind its apparent, calm tranquility. Hidden among the foliage, several masked archers and assassins patiently await the arrival of their next victims. Two bandits whisper, commenting on the two rookies who separated from the main group, laughing at how easily they will eliminate them. The criminal scoffs mockingly and says the other fools chasing the silver coins are also marching blindly straight to their own deaths. Suddenly, quick, firm footsteps begin to echo down the forest dirt path, catching the ambusher's attention. The bandit remembers how pathetic the last group of adventurers was, ending up on their knees begging for mercy before passing. But their conversation is cut short by the sharp, metallic sound of a bright blade being swiftly drawn from the shadows. Laughing sadistically, the criminal wonders what kinds of terrified and despairing faces the new victims will make when attacked. A sharp movement in the dirt reveals the rapid approach of an extremely skilled and determined warrior. With an impressive advance, Eldmia emerges, slicing through the bushes with sword in hand, surprising the ambushers in the brush. The bandits go into a complete panic upon realizing the surprise attack came from the young adventurer instead of originating from themselves. The Prota stands imposing, wiping away the blood of the defeated enemies, leaving the survivors in shock to recognize the lone rookie, without giving them any time to react. The young warrior charges forward again at high speed across the forest battlefield. He perfectly dodges the fired arrows and delivers a precise sword strike against the assailants trying to surround him. An intense, bright blue aura emanates from the Prota's sword, indicating he is about to use all of his immense magical power. With another extremely precise, lethal slash, Eldmia takes down one more of the lackeys trying to stop him. He skillfully evades another arrow, while an archer gets ready to shoot once more from the ground. The archer screams desperately to his companions not to panic and tries to aim at the blue-haired boy. The Prota's focused, intimidating glare indicates he already has the situation entirely under his control. He dodges the arrow in midair with extreme ease, leaving the shooter in a complete state of shock. The bandit panics upon realizing a single kid is defeating their entire crew without the slightest effort. Eldmia delivers the final blow and ensures in thought that he will also save the other foolish adventurers who were blinded by greed. With a confident smile, the boy says he just came up with a very good plan to resolve this entire situation. Hearing that, Cheryl glares at him with an expression of total distrust and questions what kind of plan that would be. Holding his blood-stained sword, the Prota admits with an amused tone that perhaps calling that a plan is a bit of a stretch. He observes the carnage around him, with all the bandits in that area completely defeated and fallen on the forest floor. A close-up of his face shows the boy taking a deep breath. Satisfied with the result of his first intervention, Eldmia calculates that by making so much noise, the news will soon reach the Baron, stopping him from sending more adventurers to their deaths. He stares at the sky through the trees and hopes that Cheryl found some useful clue in her parallel investigation, trusting her strength. The Prota decides it's time to pull back with the prisoner before enemy reinforcements show up around there. He pokes the unconscious bandit's head with his sword scabbard, ordering sharply for the man to wake up at once. The criminal lets out a groan of pain and slowly opens his eyes, quite dazed from the wounds and his swollen cheek. With a terrifying expression, Eldmia warns with a sarcastic smile that the two are now going to have a very friendly chat. Meanwhile, Cheryl locates a small, suspicious wooden shelter and opens the door to investigate what lies inside. She notices the place hides a dark staircase leading to the underground and wonders what the reason is for building a cellar out here in the middle of the brush. With slow, highly cautious steps, the blonde youth begins to descend the wooden steps toward the deep darkness. Cheryl plugs her nose in disgust due to a horrible, unbearable odor radiating from the bottom of that mysterious abandoned cellar. Suddenly, her foot bumps into something strange, and she feels she just stepped on a cold, bloody human hand on the floor. She freezes upon realizing something strange and damp just brushed against her boot in the darkness of that humid underground cold sweat trickles down the young warrior's face as she tries to process the horror of the situation she finds herself in. Looking at the floor, she is left horrified and breathless to face a terrifying pile of bodies covered in blood. In the forest, Eldmia coldly interrogates the captured bandit, demanding to know what exactly they were collecting at that location. Trembling in absolute terror, the battered criminal stammers and reveals they were gathering human bodies in the forest ruins. Eldmia is surprised when the man explains those were the corpses of the adventurers lost during the first hunt for the bandits. Infuriated, the Prota shakes the bandit by the collar and asks for what bizarre, sickening reason they would do something so disgusting. Underground, Cheryl wonders about the reason for hiding so many casualties there when a suspicious silhouette emerges at the top of the stairs. The sound of heavy, firm footsteps slowly descending the wooden steps begins to echo through the dark, tense environment. Cheryl immediately notices the intruder's approach and enters maximum alert status. Bracing for the worst, she stares at the staircase entrance as the stranger finishes descending, revealing an extremely intimidating presence. With a fierce look full of fury, the blonde girl draws her sharp metal sword, ready to face whoever it may be. A metallic noise of clashing blades echoes from inside the cabin, indicating a violent combat just started in there. Outside, the vineyard's beautiful scenery under the blue sky hides the dreadful, bloody secret about to be revealed. Oblivious to the real danger, the other adventurers start marching excitedly toward the forest to begin the hunt for the bandits. A soldier lets the Baron know everything is already properly prepared to kick off the operation, and the noble authorizes the start immediately. With a scheming look, the Baron whispers that they will personally eliminate any adventurer who manages to make it out of there alive. He thinks that with this, that person's plan will finally come to fruition, but is interrupted by a servant's desperate shout. The lackey comes running out of the forest and reports breathlessly that a dreadful emergency just happened in the middle of the thick brush. The Baron goes into a complete state of shock upon hearing the report and stammers, unable to believe what the blue-haired boy did. He grinds his teeth with uncontrollable fury upon realizing his perfect plan was ruined by a mere child. The noble orders the middleman to stall the adventurers any way he can to keep them waiting while he handles the situation. Underground, Cheryl faces a mysterious man and thinks to herself she'd prefer to avoid fighting without knowing the enemy's strength, but has no choice. An intense purple aura begins to emanate from the young warrior's hands as she grips her metal sword with total firmness. With a psychotic, extremely confident smile, she releases all of her magical power to kick off the life-or-death duel. The opponent wields his sword and looks visibly surprised to see that blonde girl possesses such an overwhelming, dangerous energy. Terrified by the murderous aura the young girl radiates, the mysterious warrior screams in panic, wanting to know who on earth she really is. Suddenly, a massive explosion of smoke and debris occurs, destroying the wooden cabin's entrance. One of the criminals is brutally thrown outside, letting out a loud groan of pain upon impact. Cheryl takes a firm step out of the cellar, stepping without rush over the destroyed pieces of wood. She coldly warns that he'd better spill everything he knows, otherwise she won't be held responsible for the consequences. The criminal chuckles on the ground and says using an aura doesn't make her a hero, arrogantly warning that he isn't alone there. However, the sound of firm footsteps approaching right behind him begins to echo along the dirt path. The other cohorts turn around quickly. With expressions of pure panic upon noticing someone else's arrival, Eldmia emerges like a blue lightning bolt and takes down two opponents at once with an extremely rapid sword. Slash, the leader shouts furiously upon realizing she also has allies and orders nobody to lower their guard by any means. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he notices something very bizarre is happening right in front of him. The criminal looks around confused, realizing there is absolutely no one visible left in the cabin yard. In a fraction of a second, Cheryl resurfaces right behind him with her weapon raised and engulfed in a powerful purple energy. The man feels a deadly shiver down his spine upon realizing he was completely cornered by the young warrior. The two trade a quick strike, but the girl's strength and speed are far superior to her adversary's. Cheryl's bright blade cuts through the air with absolute precision, easily overcoming the opponent's desperate defense. With a fluid, deadly motion, she delivers the final blow that completely liquidates the criminal leader's resistance. Meanwhile, Eldmia executes a spectacular leap in the air to deliver a powerful downward strike against his target. Concentrating an immense amount of pure magical power, the young Prota glows in an extremely intense blue tone. After landing, Eldmia observes the opponent dodge, while the Baron takes a stance releasing a purple aura from his feet. The noble charges furiously from above with his glowing sword, determined to cut the meddling youth in half. With flawless reflexes, Eldmia raises his weapon and blocks the heavy vertical attack with extreme ease. The devastating impact between the two blades generates a shockwave that rattles the trees and the ground around them. Eldmia backs up, sliding along the dirt ground to cushion the blow's force, staying firm in his combat stance. With a defiant smile, the Prota comments that he already expected his appearance and recognizes the presence of an aura in the attack. The Baron glares at him with hatred, realizing that Cheeky Kid truly is the prodigy capable of manipulating an aura. However, the noble's countenance suddenly changes to an expression of pure astonishment as he looks around. He panics upon seeing that all of his subordinates have already been completely annihilated and lie lifeless on the ground. The man laments and holds his head in hatred, complaining that his entire effort and perfect plan to rise in rank was ruined. Eldmia coldly questions what the Baron would gain by luring and massacring innocent adventurers in that cruel manner. Unwilling to give explanations, the noble shouts furiously for the boy to shut his mouth and launches into another mortal charge. He screams that he will use their bodies as stepping stones to his glory, leaving the boy indignant that he kills people for fame. The Baron is surprised to feel the boy's colossal strength pushing his sword back with extreme ease. With a quick, dodging motion, Eldmia breaks his adversary's posture and creates a perfect opening to finish things. The Prota advances and connects a blunt strike straight to the corrupt aristocrat's chest. The Baron lets out a groan of pain and spits blood upon being violently hit by the boy's attack. He is thrown hard against the forest ground, kicking up a large cloud of dust with the impact of the fall, completely dazed. The man tries to stand up and wonders what just happened due to the speed of the blow. The Baron realizes, horrified, that the Prota moved so fast, his eyes weren't capable of tracking a thing. With an implacable look full of contempt, Eldmia tells the corrupt noble to count himself lucky and enjoy the moment raising his glowing sword. The boy warns that he will ensure the entire kingdom discovers what a worthless piece of trash the Baron really is. Desperate, the Baron crawls backward and reveals that those involved were acting under direct orders from the enemy army's demons. Right at that moment, Cheryl emerges from among the bushes and hears the revelation with an expression of extreme seriousness. Eldmia questions him on whether the demons actually threatened him or if he's just spinning lies to manage to survive. Suddenly, a mysterious, rapid-hooded silhouette leaps from one of the trees toward the forest clearing. The noble insists desperately that it is the absolute truth and promises to even lead them straight to the monster's hideout. However, the mysterious assassin stealthily lands right behind the young Prota with a dagger in hand. Eldmia notices the subtle movement at his back and swiftly turns his head to try and defend against the surprise charge. But the intruder's target was someone else, and he cuts Baron Papayera's throat in a surgical, extremely cruel movement. Blood splatters violently from the noble's neck, silencing forever any other revelation he could make. The young Prota stands static, in complete shock. Faced with that unexpected close-range elimination, Eldmia is left completely shocked and speechless in front of that unexpected scene. The assassin wipes the bloody dagger and comments laughing that he didn't imagine the Baron would talk so much. He turns around calmly and asks Eldmia if this entire situation isn't simply awful. The scene shifts to the large, busy royal capital, showing the buildings under the clear sky. Cheryl says the rumors were real and mentions the so-called King's Shadows. She explains they are a secret intelligence unit operating in the shadows and possessing high combat capability, Cheryl adds, noting they are people capable of doing anything to protect the kingdom. Walter smiles and confirms the girl's suspicions. Officially introducing himself as a member of that organization, Cheryl asks the reason they were brought to the guild, since there must be a reason for it. Eldmia gets annoyed and demands to know why Walter ended Baron Papayera so suddenly in the forest. Walter apologizes, saying it was an emergency, but the youth snaps that that is not the point of the discussion. Eldmia vents that the Baron had backing from the demons and that they could have secured crucial clues if he were alive. The boy then questions what they are truly searching for with all of that, leaving the man in silence. Suddenly, an elegant man enters the room and says he will make it a point to answer that question. He formally introduces himself as Engrim, the master of that Capital Adventurers Guild. Eldmia gets suspicious and wonders just how involved the guildmaster is in this whole situation. Engrim sincerely apologizes for the occurrence and expresses gratitude for them saving the lives of many adventurers. He begins to sit down in the armchair while preparing to speak about something more serious. The guildmaster explains that he still cannot provide details as it concerns a very delicate matter in the kingdom. Eldmia and Cheryl complain about the lack of answers and ask why on earth they were brought there after all. The guildmaster cracks a slight mysterious smile before revealing the true reason for the meeting. Engrim proposes that Eldmia accept a special mission and promises to share everything he knows if he agrees. Still suspicious, the young hero asks what kind of mysterious request that would be. The guildmaster says he still cannot give all the details of the plan, but begins to explain the context. He directly reveals that this entire situation directly involves the demons. Engrim specifies that it concerns the Demon King's army and that a direct confrontation will be inevitable. Eldmia clenches his fists tightly upon realizing the monsters truly were behind all of that. He thinks to himself that he will finally have the grand chance to face his worst enemies face to face. The boy remembers that tragic day from the past as if it had happened. Yesterday, Walter merely observes in silence the young hero's serious, determined reaction. Eldmia accepts the job without hesitation, and Engrim lets him know Walter will relay all the necessary details. Walter stands up and asks the lad to accompany him to another, more private spot to talk. Cheryl stands up determined, muttering that it concerns a major battle against demons. However, Engrim warns that she won't be able to accompany him on the mission, leaving the girl revolted. The guildmaster asks her to understand the situation and the delicacy of her position at the moment. He explains that he already involved her too much as the daughter of the king's third sword, making her sigh in frustration. Cheryl then catches Eldmia's attention as he prepares to leave the room with Walter. She says she perfectly understands his feelings, but asks him not to push past his own limits. With a confident smile, Eldmia nods back and tells his companion not to worry about him. Cheryl watches him depart in complete silence, maintaining a thoughtful and worried expression. The scene shifts to a calm cemetery under the sunlight, filled with tombstones and a large stone cross. Some white flowers are left on a grave, while Walter asks if he noticed the increase in bandit hunting missions. He reveals the bandits acted under external orders, and Eldmia deduces that the demons were behind it. Walter explains those criminals were mere pawns to divert attention, and the boy asks for the real objective. The man reveals they discovered a small group of demons managed to infiltrate near the royal capital. He continues, noting they use the bandits as puppets to divert the attention of the kingdom's defense forces. Eldmia suggests sending the army, but Walter explains that open movements would make the enemies flee immediately. He clarifies they need someone who can act in absolute secrecy and whose strength is entirely unknown. Walter defines that his mission will be to track the demons, uncover their plan, and try to capture them alive. He hands a note to the young adventurer and lets him know that if necessary, he is authorized to eliminate them. Walter hands the paper to Eldmia and lets him know the people who will accompany him on the mission are already waiting at the indicated spot. The youth realizes it isn't a solo mission, and Walter explains that facing unknown demons alone would be too much even for him. Walter reassures him that everyone there is a strong warrior and was handpicked by the guildmaster himself. Night falls over the city while the Prota heads toward the marked meeting point. Upon arriving in front of a large inn, Eldmia stops and notices that is the location indicated on the paper. He adjusts his hood so as not to draw attention, knowing he is close to the enemy hideout and needs to stay highly focused. The lad pushes open the wooden door, which creaks, announcing his entry into the noisy establishment. Eldmia takes a few steps inside the packed tavern and begins to search for the mysterious group. Seeing so many people gathered drinking and talking, he realizes his companions must be around there somewhere. Suddenly, the boy spots something flashy that leaves him completely shocked and speechless. He faces a massive welcome banner with his own name written right in the middle of the place. Completely embarrassed and flustered by that over-the-top reception, Eldmia wonders what is going on. He observes the red-haired woman downing a massive mug of drink and begins to fear the worst. She spots the lad and shouts out loud, asking if he is Eldmia, telling him to get over to the table right away. The youth gets annoyed and thinks to himself that the guild master must have lost his mind when choosing those people. Trying to keep his composure in front of the scene, Eldmia finally sits down at the table to talk. He asks if they truly are Engram's chosen ones, but the group's dwarf doesn't even seem to remember who that man is. The lad explains annoyed that it concerns the guild master, and the dwarf finally remembers the fellow with glasses. Eldmia barks that flashy banner could alert the demons, but the redhead laughs and tells him to relax. The dwarf asks her to speak softer, and the woman apologizes, laughing without giving much weight to the warning. Eldmia gets very impatient, thinking about how bothersome that woman is, and that this isn't a joke. She celebrates the lad's determination and introduces herself as Ekaterina, a foreign warrior, right after. The girl in the purple hood stammers nervously and timidly introduces herself as R'lyeh, a mage. Eldmia notices the young girl is shaking with fear and wonders if she has ever participated in a single mission in her life. The boy then turns to the dwarf, expecting him to introduce himself to the rest of the group as well. However, the little man stays focused on his paper drawings and completely ignores Eldmia's presence. Ekaterina laughs out loud and explains that grumpy fellow is Gin, a dwarf painter whom he doesn't need to take very seriously. Eldmia starts breaking into a cold sweat and senses that this group mission has every reason to go terribly wrong. While he questions how he's going to work with that bizarre group, the hooded mage mutters that she wanted to go home. He rips down the embarrassing banner with his name, commenting that he doesn't even need to introduce himself after so much exposure. Ekaterina says she was looking forward to fighting alongside the famous Mad Dog, leaving Eldmia confused by that nickname. She confirms, laughing, that everyone calls him that because he tends to fight in a wild and relentless manner in combat. The boy gets disappointed that his first adventurer nickname is something so weird instead of something imposing. Suddenly, a loud noise coming from another table catches Eldmia's attention, making him look back. An agitated man shouts at the tavern attendant, demanding to know if he has any clue who he's dealing with. The attendant responds coldly that he only cares that he pays for everything he ate and drank there. The intoxicated man points his finger furiously and threatens the worker, saying he will regret that attitude. He screams that soon, everyone there will be his subordinates. While the attendant tells the drunk not to get arrogant, Eldmia observes the troublemaker in a very serious manner, immediately distrusting his words. The drunk's friends cover his mouth and hand over an extra bag of coins to calm the situation with the bar owner. They express thanks for the food and quickly exit, dragging the intoxicated man out of there. Ekaterina asks if he heard that, and Eldmia agrees that those men's attitude was extremely suspicious. R'lyeh comments timidly that she heard rumors about humans collaborating with demons and that they could be traitors. Ekaterina smiles aggressively and suggests they just give them a beating to beat answers out of them. Eldmia rejects the violent idea, explaining that if any escape, the demons will know of their presence and notes they should just tail them. The warrior pulls the lad into a playful hug, praising his level-headedness, but he tells her to save the compliments for later. Under the mantle of the starry night, the suspects begin to walk down a path surrounded by tall trees. Hidden behind some bushes at the forest's edge, Eldmia's group observes the targets advance with lanterns. R'lyeh asks if they should follow them into the brush, but the young leader says it's too risky without knowing the terrain. Instead, Eldmia begins to concentrate his glowing magic in the palm of his hand to use another silent approach. The mage R'lyeh looks surprised and confused to see that glowing butterfly suddenly emerge. Eldmia holds the small magical creature that glows intensely in the palm of his hands with a gentle motion. The magical butterfly takes flight and softly lands on the back of one of the targets. Eldmia lets them know they will maintain a safe distance and merely follow the glowing trail left by it. R'lyeh asks, impressed, how he learned to summon a spirit, and the lad responds that it was his elf master. Eldmia says it was just by chance and emphasizes they have an important tracking job to do right now. The group follows the luminous trail until they see the suspicious men stopping right in front of a stone cave. Hidden among the leaves, Eldmia whispers to the others that right ahead lies their destination. He notices the location turns out to be an old abandoned dungeon that hasn't been used in a long time. Suddenly, a cold, mysterious voice coming from inside the cave complains about the men's delay. Upon hearing that terrifying voice, Eldmia feels a shiver and goes into maximum alert status. A mysterious, silver-haired person reveals a pair of pointed black horns on their head. The prota's eyes widen as he immediately recognizes the creature's features in front of him. The powerful demon emerges imposing before everyone, demanding they always arrive at the agreed time. Eldmia starts breaking into a cold sweat, having absolute certainty that he finally found what he was looking for. He glares at the humans, annoyed, complaining that he gave them permission to go to the village to rest, and they broke the promise. The men apologize, shaking with fear, but the insolent drunk tells the demon to relax a bit. He complains that it's been weeks since they went out and says the delay should be forgiven, leaving his friends in panic. The drunk keeps shouting and saying the demon is only there thanks to their work and deserves more respect. The horned being merely listens to him in silence with an extremely cold and menacing look. With a rapid, merciless movement, the monster grabs the cheeky man's face with force. Without hesitating a single second, the demon shatters his head, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The man's other companions scream, horrified in the face of such gratuitous brutality. Hidden in the brush, Eldmia and his allies watch that violent execution in complete shock. The demon wipes the blood from his hand and mutters about how foolish humans are for complaining despite receiving rewards. He coldly orders them to clean up that mess and asserts that the demon's victory in the war is very close. The monster promises everyone will be well rewarded in the end and orders them to return immediately to their posts. Completely terrified, the men obey promptly and agree to do the job quickly. Ekaterina whispers that the demon is a true psychopath and asks if Eldmia agrees with her. Noting the boy's silence, the warrior turns around worried and asks if he is really doing okay. He responds that he is, but on the inside ensures he never forgot everything that happened in the past. The youth grips his own chest upon remembering the scars and everything the demons took from him on that day. With a terrifyingly manic smile, Eldmia says he is doing great and celebrates finally finding his target. The subordinates carry the lifeless body into the dungeon while the demon observes with his back turned. While the enemies enter the location, the adventurer group continues lying in wait. Monitoring their steps, Ekaterina stands up in a hurry to follow them, leaving the young Prota completely surprised by her attitude. Eldmia reacts fast and grabs her back, snapping at her not to advance recklessly without a defined plan. However, the demon hears the subtle noise in the brush and begins to turn his face toward their hiding spot. He narrows his eyes with suspicion, staring at the bushes with an extremely sharp expression. Lying on the ground, Eldmia covers the warrior's mouth to prevent any sound while holding his sword tightly. The sound of heavy footsteps approaching makes sweat trickle down the young hero's tense face. Eldmia's eyes widen upon realizing the creature is just a single step away from uncovering their hiding spot. With a rapid movement, the demon fires a sharp blast of dark energy against the suspicious bushes. The strike passes, grazing right over them, cutting only the tallest leaves and kicking up a fine dust. Seeing that apparently nothing is there, the monster mutters that it must have been merely a figment of his imagination. Silence returns to the dark forest under the pale glow of the full moon, illuminating the treetops. The group finally manages to breathe a sigh of relief. Commenting on how close they were to being completely uncovered, Ekaterina begins to laugh out loud at the dangerous situation, leaving Eldmia increasingly annoyed by her lack of awareness. The boy explodes in anger and shouts, asking what she had in her head since she almost ruined the entire secret mission. She tries to calm him down in a casual way, telling him not to stress so much since the ultimate goal is to defeat them anyway. Eldmia snaps that they don't even know what lies inside, and that it would be foolish to attack without knowing the enemy's number or strength. He shouts that this isn't a game and tells her to go back home if she's only going to do whatever pops into her head. The boy glares at the other two and warns that the same goes for them if they aren't fully committed to the mission. With his back to the group, he asserts with determination that failing is not an option and that he needs to capture the creatures regardless. He wants to drag the Demon King's army's plans straight into the light once and for all. He begins to walk away alone, saying that if they head back, they should let the master know he will handle everything on his own. The three companions look visibly discouraged and confused by the lad's proud attitude. Later on, under the moon's glow, Eldmia positions himself at the top of a cliff to plan his entry. The Prota closely observes the movement below him, with his hood covering part of his face. Noticing only a single guard watching the cave entrance, he thinks about whether he should wait for the shift change to attack them. While reflecting on the need to first understand the internal structure, someone silently approaches him. Suddenly, a hand gives a few light pats on the young hero's shoulder, leaving him confused and startled. Turning around, he sees the dwarf Jin extending a rolled-up piece of paper with a very serious expression. Eldmia opens the scroll, intrigued, and wonders what kind of document that would be. He is surprised to realize it's a map and questions if that really is the detailed layout of the dungeon. Relai reveals proudly that the dwarf Jin himself drew that entire detailed schematic of the location. The mage explains that right after accepting the mission, the dwarf researched all records of the area and mapped out the nearby caves. Eldmia finally understands what the dwarf was drawing earlier at the tavern and recognizes his incredible talent in mapping. The lad expresses thanks from the bottom of his heart for the precious map, receiving a silent thumbs up back from the skilled dwarf. At that moment, Ekaterina approaches with crossed arms and calls the Prota by his nickname. She sincerely apologizes for her previous behavior, admitting she just ended up getting too excited about being in a group again. The youth says it's fine, and that the important thing is that in the end they weren't discovered by the enemy. The warrior reassures him she won't pry into his personal motivations, even knowing it involves the hatred for demons. She adds that the other two didn't accept the mission for nothing either, but rather because each possesses their own reasons. Extending her hand to the lad with a defiant smile, she asks for him to fight alongside them. From then on, Eldmia feels embarrassed for letting his emotions speak louder and acting in such a childish manner with them. He mentally admits he was trying to look tough, even knowing he couldn't resolve everything entirely on his own. The youth takes a deep breath and looks seriously at the extended hand of his brave teammate. He accepts the handshake with determination, asking for them to watch his back during the imminent combat. He smiles and jokes, saying he needs to make up for the clumsy display he made at the start of the journey with a good performance. Now Eldmia takes the lead and proposes using each other's strengths to chart a perfect invasion plan. The scene returns to the dungeon entrance, where the lone human guard continues watching the location without suspecting a thing. The man yawns lazily and mutters, complaining about the fatigue and heavy sleepiness he is feeling during that watch. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise approaching and narrows his eyes to try and see better in the darkness. He spots the silhouette of someone advancing in his direction in an intimidating manner and demands to know who is there. Ekaterina emerges with a terrifying smile and her massive hammer on her shoulders. Mentalizing the plan's final instructions, Eldmia's voice in a flashback explains that the dungeon is made of multiple small rooms surrounding a large central hall. He points out on the map that the room located at the very back is the most suspicious of sheltering the demon's secret activities. The plan consists of using bait to draw the guards away, while the others sneak into the main room quietly. Ekaterina immediately volunteered to be the decoy for the invasion. Catching the young proto by surprise, she reassures him with a wild smile that this role of drawing attention suits her loud personality perfectly. The redhead says acting stealthily isn't her style and prefers to do what is best, cause absolute chaos at the entrance. Back in the present, the watchman panics upon seeing the gigantic woman approach him wielding the warhammer. She charges furiously and tells the guard to let the traitors allied with the demons know she wants to fight every single one of them. With a powerful leap in the air, the warrior delivers a crushing blow with her heavy hammer against the dirt ground. The weapon's brutal impact generates a tremendous explosion of dust and debris that echoes throughout the surrounding forest. A massive curtain of smoke and dust completely covers the entrance to the old abandoned dungeon. The warrior observes the guard knocked out on the ground from the impact, maintaining her unbeatable battle stance. She lets out a good-natured laugh and casually admits that perhaps she overdid it a bit with the force of the blow. Ekaterina then looks back and tells Eldmia to seize the opening and invade the place right away before all the enemies show up. Eldmia mentally thanks Ekaterina for the backup and draws his glowing sword, ready to make his move. With the plan now in motion, the young man leads Gin and Relai into the dark, abandoned dungeon. The inside of the dungeon is packed with massive stone pillars and creepy gargoyle statues. Inside, the demon turns around in absolute silence, sensing a disturbance coming from the entrance. A man rushes in, completely panicked, warning about an attack at the entrance, but the monster coldly replies that he already knows without a single warning. The demon delivers a lightning-fast graze that instantly silences the messenger. He claims he can sense the enemy's presence all on his own, and arrogantly asks who the human thought he was dealing with. The horned beast realizes the intruders have noticed his presence and mocks their total lack of stealth. Another traitor approaches, worried about the escape plan, and suggests they should get ready to pull back soon. The demon shuts down the suggestion and orders them to stick to the plan, saying victory will be guaranteed once they finish. He tells the lackey to focus on his work and leave the intruders to him, receiving a shaky nod of confirmation. As he heads toward the entrance, the monster mutters under his breath, irritated that these busybodies are forcing him to step in. Out in the hallway, the rest of the guards sprint in a panic toward the entrance, trying to hold off the intruder. Eldmia watches from behind a stone pillar as the enemies shout in surprise, realizing there is only one person at the gate. He smiles, seeing that the plan worked perfectly, and all the guards' attention is completely locked onto Ekaterina. The young man tells his crew to avoid the main hallways and sneak toward the back room in total silence. However, he notices something off and stops dead in his tracks, looking back with a puzzled expression. The boy finds the mage, Relai, completely curled up and shivering in fear on the cold stone floor. Eldmia calls out to her quietly to avoid making noise, startling the young girl, who answers immediately in a panic. Worried, he asks if she is all right, and she apologizes with a stutter, saying she is just way too nervous about the situation. The mage laments feeling so pathetic for freezing up and shaking like this at such a crucial moment. Eldmia watches her in complete silence, fully understanding the absolute terror the young girl is going through. With a gentle look, he disagrees with her and decides to calm her down with some kind words. The young man honestly confesses that his own heart nearly leaps out of his chest whenever he thinks about facing demons. He explains that he simply does not let the terror take over completely, forcing himself to focus only on finishing the mission. Eldmia reminds her that she has her own reasons for being here and promises they will overcome this fear together. Finding her strength again, Relai agrees with the prota's words and promises she will do her absolute best to help. He orders them to keep moving forward, since they are incredibly close to the dungeon's massive central hall. Meanwhile, outside the cave, the heavy sounds of battle and clashing metal echo loudly through the air. Ekaterina laughs out loud in the middle of the fight, daring the enemies to come at her from every single direction. She tosses one of the guards high into the air with total ease, mocking how weak her opponents are. The man slams heavily onto the dirt ground, letting out an agonizing groan after taking the hit. Another furious criminal points at the warrior woman, cursing at her while trying to get his bearings back to fight. With her eyes glowing intensely, she swings her massive heavy hammer to deliver another devastating strike. The crushing impact of the weapon creates a massive shockwave, blasting the remaining opponents far away. Several enemies are left knocked out all around the redhead, who stands triumphant in the middle of the courtyard. She wipes her mouth, feeling tired, and mockingly asks if that was really all of them, saying they were barely worth the effort. Suddenly, a terrifying pair of glowing purple eyes emerges from the shadows right behind the confident warrior. Sensing the overwhelming danger closing in from behind, she grits her teeth and gets ready to dodge. The demon leaps down, delivering a lethal slash that collides violently against the handle of her hammer. With a determined smile despite the pressure of the strike, she comments that he finally decided to show up and fight. She taunts the enemy, calling him a horned freak, and stares him down without showing a single shred of fear. The horned beast glares back with utter disdain, maintaining absolute silence in the face of her bold provocation. The demon reflects on the battle and instantly realizes that this loud warrior is nothing more than a distraction. With a smirk, he deduces that the rest of the intruders must already be inside his secret base. He comments aloud that using bait was a clever plan, leaving the redhead momentarily confused. Gathering his powerful purple magic energy in his left hand, the monster warns that he is going to end this quickly. Ekaterina breaks into a cold sweat from his terrifying aura, but dares him to try and take her down if he actually can. Meanwhile, rapid footsteps echo through the inner stone hallways of the ancient abandoned dungeon. Eldmia leads the sprint, thinking that they only need to turn one more corner to reach their objective room. They finally reach the grand hall, and Eldmia calls out that he has found their target. However, as they rush into the room, they stop instantly in complete and utter shock. They spot two hooded mages floating in the air, activating a gigantic purple energy portal right in the center of the hall. Eldmia barks that he finally found them, while R'lyeh asks in horror what kind of bizarre structure that is. The Prota explains seriously that they are casting a teleportation spell, in other words, a dimensional portal. He wonders why they would build something like that here, suspecting either a full-scale invasion or the transport of something massive. But he quickly realizes there is no time for guessing games. He needs to act right now to stop the ritual. With a fast leap from the top of the hallway, the Prota lunges forward with his sword to try and disrupt the process. One of our enemies notices the boy's surprise attack and clicks his teeth in pure irritation. He yells at the young intruder to get back and holds out his hand to cast a powerful defensive spell. Eldmia is violently blasted by a strong burst of magical flames that explodes right in front of him mid-air. Feeling the impact of the fiery attack, the boy grits his teeth and tries to hold his ground with all his might. A massive wall of fire spreads across the hall, trapping the Prota inside a thick curtain of intense flames. The magic circle beneath Eldmia's feet glows with an incredibly dangerous, bright reddish tint. The young hero starts to panic as he senses the immense amount of energy gathered in that single attack. Suddenly, the consuming flames explode around him once more, completely cutting off any chance of escape. The mage laughs triumphantly, believing he has taken down the young intruder once and for all. However, Eldmia emerges completely unharmed from the fire, using his sword encased in a powerful blue energy barrier. The enemy is shocked and horrified to see that the boy was able to cast a flawless shield in a split second. Taking advantage of the distraction, the mage R'lyeh raises her staff and casts a support spell to aid Eldmia. Boosted by his ally's magic, the Prota leaps toward the opponent with his sword raised high to strike. The mage tries to defend himself by raising a purple energy shield, causing a massive clash between the two powers. Eldmia's sharp blade slowly begins to slice through the enemy's magic barrier, which starts to crack. He panics as he realizes that the intruders also possess top-tier defensive skills to strike back. With a sharp, relentless gaze, the Prota forces his sword down even harder to shatter the opponent's defense. The other enemy mage suddenly appears from behind, prepping a fire spell to save his partner. He shouts in hatred and fires a massive, concentrated fireball straight at the back of the young hero's head. Right at that moment, the dwarf Jin catches him by surprise from behind, getting ready to land a preemptive strike. He accepts the handshake with determination, asking them to watch his back during the upcoming fight. He panics as he realizes the dwarf suddenly burst through the stone structure right underneath him with brutal force. Gin lands a direct hit on the opponent with his heavy pickaxe, making him let out an agonizing cry from the impact. The first mage looks back in a total panic. Wondering what is going on as he watches his partner get taken down, Eldmia takes advantage of the opening in the enemy's defense and gathers his magic power into his sword for the final blow. He delivers a lightning-fast diagonal slash. Enveloped in a bright, sharp blue energy, the sheer force of the attack completely shatters the opponent's purple magic barrier like thin glass. The solid strike hits the sorcerer square in the chest, breaking his defensive stance instantly. The man coughs up blood and screams in pain as he is violently cut down by the prota's powerful rush. Without giving him a moment to breathe, Eldmia grabs him and slams him hard against the ancient dungeon's stone floor. Holding the wounded enemy by the collar, the boy demands to know why they are building that portal. Even in defeat, the lackey sneers and replies that he would never reveal his plans to a mere human. The hero grits his teeth, infuriated by the arrogance of the traitor who refuses to answer his questions. Relay comments that they would be in serious trouble if they took any longer, but stops talking as she senses something strange in the air. She realizes in horror that the massive purple portal is practically complete and is starting to vortex everything around it. Eldmia rushes forward, determined to smash the magic structure by force, but the young mage screams in a panic for him to stop. She explains that breaking the portal physically like that would be way too dangerous for everyone inside the room. The mage clarifies that the portal uses a colossal amount of mana to connect two distant points in space. She adds that if the flow suddenly collapses, it will trigger an explosion capable of wiping this entire area right off the map. The prota goes rigid and bites his lip in anger as he realizes the sheer scale of the danger they are facing. He shakes the wounded mage again and furiously demands that he reveal right now how to shut the machine down. The bloody enemy only offers a sinister smile, mocking the young hero's desperate attempt. Overcome with rage, Eldmia lands a devastating punch straight to the arrogant mage's face, making blood splatter. Even battered, the enemy spits out blood and repeats that he would never say a word to a pathetic human. He claims his race's victory is inevitable and tells the humans to just sit back and wait to be ruled over. With his bloody hand resting on his face, the prota whispers in a bone-chilling voice, telling the lackey to speak up already. The mage bursts out laughing, saying there is absolutely nothing they can do to stop the demon army's plans. Out of patience for the taunts, Eldmia delivers a fatal finishing blow that silences the enemy forever. With a terrifying glare, the young man orders the other piece of trash mage left over to tell him how to shut down the portal. Right now, fueled by deep hatred, the boy beats the other sorcerer on the ground repeatedly, without showing an ounce of mercy. He yells, asking why they came all the way out here, while Raleigh watches the entire scene unfold, frozen in fear. The young man demands to know why they built that portal, leaving the dwarf Jin highly concerned about his mental state. The young hero completely loses control and keeps striking the enemy in a blind fury, screaming for answers. He flashes back to that tragic day when he was just a helpless kid and the demons destroyed his home and took everything from him. With his face covered in blood, Eldmia screams, demanding a final answer for all the suffering from his past. Realizing the young man has completely lost his mind, Gin quickly steps in and grabs his arm to hold back the blind rage. The dwarf looks at him with a serious, worried expression. Trying to bring the young man back to reality in this tense moment, Eldmia finally snaps out of it and widens his eyes, panting and startled by his own sudden outburst of irrational hatred. The prota steps away from the lifeless body on the ground and tries to calm his heavy breathing after the fit of rage. He clicks his teeth in frustration, upset at himself for letting his emotions get the better of him in the middle of such an important mission. Raleigh thinks to herself that this was definitely not the calmest interrogation she had ever witnessed. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing down the dungeon hallway grabs the entire group's attention. The fearsome demon appears, dragging Ekaterina's unconscious body across the floor like it is absolutely nothing. Raleigh turns pale and loses her breath upon seeing the strongest warrior in their group, defeated so easily and humiliatingly. The monster lifts the redhead up by her crimson hair and coldly comments that she was actually a pretty decent opponent. Eldmia is completely speechless. Seeing his companion defeated and at the mercy of that evil creature, he begins to break into a cold sweat, feeling the immense crushing pressure of the malicious aura radiating from the horned demon. The young man remembers back when he asked the warrior woman if she would be fine on her own, and her confident reply. He recalls telling her to just draw attention and run if things got dangerous. But she just laughed off his concern. Ekaterina had promised she would wrap things up quickly outside so she could meet up with them inside right after back in the present. The powerful demon tosses the redhead's wounded body onto the stone floor without a care in the world. The horned beast proudly comments that, when all was said and done, the warrior was no match for his immense power. Overwhelmed by a surging fury, Eldmia grips the handle of his sword so tightly that his fingers begin to shake. He completely loses control and leaps from the top of the hallway, unleashing a lethal strike against the demon. The Proto roars in anger, asking what the monster did to his injured teammate. With her eyes glowing intensely, she swings her massive, heavy hammer to deliver another devastating strike. The crushing impact of the weapon creates a massive shockwave, blasting the remaining opponents far away. The solid strike hits the sorcerer square in the chest, breaking his defensive stance instantly. Eldmia recovers quickly in midair and manages to catch the redhead's body before she slams hard into the ground. Desperate, he holds her in his arms and yells for the warrior woman to hang in there and try to stay awake. She opens her eyes with great difficulty and grits her teeth in pure pain, trying to stay conscious for the battle. Without giving them a moment to rest, the demon charges forward, delivering a devastating kick toward the young hero. Eldmia quickly raises his arm to block the heavy strike, but the sheer force of the impact breaks his stance. The violent impact blasts the boy against the wall with enough force to crack the stone structure. The horned beast lands on the ground and widens his eyes. Slightly surprised by the boy's physical endurance, the Proto manages to land on his feet, keeping his wounded companion safe in his protective embrace. With his face battered and covered in blood, Eldmia glares at the demon with a look full of pure determination and hatred. The demon admits he is quite impressed with the boy, recognizing that the blow he took was an incredibly heavy one. The monster wonders to himself how this pathetic human is somehow still standing after all of that. He holds out his hand and reflects on a strange, mysterious energy that he has never felt coming from a human before. The demon clenches his own fist, startled as he considers a possibility that should be completely impossible for a mere mortal. But before he can finish his thought, Gin sneaks up from behind, wielding his combat pickaxe. The demon notices Gin's approach and reacts instantly with a swift defensive sweep through the air. With absolute ease, the evil creature snaps the dwarf's pickaxe completely in half with a single, lightning-fast counterattack. He watches the pieces of the tool fly away and scoffs at the fact that they are trying to use a basic pickaxe against him. While the demon is distracted by Jin, the mage Relai takes the chance to charge up a massive, glowing magic circle. She fires a powerful blast of golden energy that hits the horned monster square in the back. The demon grits his teeth in pure rage as he feels the unexpectedly strong impact of the girl's spell. Panting, the young mage concentrates with everything she has, summoning even more magic circles around her to keep up the assault. Overcome by a sudden burst of determination, Relai screams furiously, telling the cursed creature to drop dead right then and there. She fires multiple consecutive glowing blasts of golden energy straight at her dangerous target. The horned beast clicks his tongue in deep irritation and gets ready to dodge the continuous barrage. Moving with superhuman agility, the demon dodges every single magic attack without getting hit again. He charges forward at an absurd speed straight toward Relai, determined to take out the problematic mage first. However, the young mage lets out a sly little smirk, leaving the horned creature confused and on high alert. Suddenly, the dwarf Gin's strong hand bursts through the rubble and firmly grabs the demon's ankle. The monster looks down, startled, completely unable to understand how that dwarf warrior survived and trapped him like this. Jin emerges from the debris with a smile, holding down his opponent with all of his spectacular physical strength. Trapped and unable to move temporarily, the demon desperately tries to shake free from Gin's grip. He realizes the perfect trap they set up together and grits his teeth as he sees the danger coming right for him. Relai points her glowing staff straight at his chest, keeping her magic circle fully charged up. She screams at the top of her lungs, telling the creature to take this devastating attack point blank. The young girl releases the massive amount of gathered energy, triggering an explosion of blinding yellow flames. The point-blank impact violently blasts the demon against the stone rubble of the grand hall. He manages to slide back and land in a crouch, showing clear signs of exhaustion and pure fury in his eyes. He takes a tense, deep breath, realizing he severely underestimated these humans' ability to work together. Right at that second, Eldmia appears dropping from above, delivering a perfectly aimed sword strike against the demon. The weapon's metal collides heavily against the creature's makeshift defense, unleashing a massive shower of sparks. Eldmia warns angrily that he already knew something was up, while the horned beast glares back at him with a dead serious expression. The two begin to trade lightning-fast, brutal blows right in the center of the ancient dungeon's hall. The demon tries to throw a punch packed with dark energy, but Eldmia blocks the attack with his sharp blade. The monster charges forward furiously once more, trying to break the persistent young hero's combat stance. Suddenly, another glowing gust of wind hits the opponent from behind, completely breaking his attacking rhythm. The monster notices the interference and thinks with utter hatred about the annoying mage who keeps backing the boy up from afar. He mutters in irritation that he really should have eliminated the mage first, before focusing on any other opponent. Eldmia takes advantage of the opening and roars at the demon to keep his eyes on him and not on his teammates. The young man charges forward at extreme speed and delivers a flawless diagonal slash right across his opponent's chest. The direct hit makes the monster spit out a large amount of blood and stumble back a few steps, completely off balance. Eldmia quickly slides across the stone floor, prepping another follow-up strike with his glowing sword. The boy lands yet another clean hit and yells in victory as he strikes right through the terrifying opponent's body. However, in the very next second, the prota's eyes widen in complete shock at what happens next. The demon catches the sharp blade of Eldmia's sword with his bare hands, completely stopping the attack in its tracks. He smiles and acknowledges their strength, commenting that the kingdom must be truly desperate to send humans like them. The horned beast begins to unleash a colossal amount of purple dark energy, warning that he is going to start fighting for real. His arm undergoes a terrifying mutation, bulging with black veins and gathering an immense destructive power. He declares that he will fight with his full power, and that he does not care what kind of tricks they try to pull on him. Faced with that monstrous transformation of dark energy, Eldmia breaks into a cold sweat and takes a tense step back in his guard stance. The monster roars that he will break all of them, and guarantees that the demon army's plan will be finished without any more interruptions. The scene shifts to memories of the past, showing a straw training dummy getting struck out in the forest. A young Eldmia trains exhaustively, hitting the straw dummy over and over again under the afternoon sun. Suddenly, his adoptive sister, Asilia, appears furious from behind and screams, asking what on earth he thinks he is doing. The boy answers that he is just training, but the elf snaps back angrily, saying that is not what she is talking about. Asilia scolds her brother for using raw mana directly in combat, explaining that he needs to refine it into an aura first. She explains that mana is his source of power, and that he should picture it like molten metal, boiling and completely liquid. The elf goes on to say that an aura appears when this energy is forged into solid steel to coat the body or weapon, working for both offense and defense. On the other hand, mana serves to give shape to the user's will through the elements, changing the properties of each one. Asilia warns that what he was doing was the exact same as coating his own body in scorching hot iron, which should have left him severely injured. Eldmia looks confused and mentions he has been doing this for years, leaving his sister completely speechless and shocked by that absurd revelation. The boy thinks it is amazing, and comments that having molten iron coat, your body sounds incredibly cool. While Asilia just stares at him in dead silence, Eldmia does not get her reaction and calls out to her awkwardly, asking if there is something wrong with what he just said. She thinks to herself that it is impossible for a human body to handle that, since there are supposed to be only 2 races capable of using mana in its raw state. The young man overhears her and asks excitedly if there are others like him, and what race those people belong to. Asilia just gulps and looks away, visibly nervous and completely unwilling to give the boy a straight answer. She gives his head a gentle pat and reminds him that he is still in the middle of training, promising they will talk about this later. Eldmia complains, asking her not to leave him hanging like that, but he cannot stop the conversation from being shut down right there. Asilia changes her tone and says seriously that if he really does not change his life goals in the future, things are going to be very different. Back in the present, the elf's prophecy comes true, as the young man comes face to face with the terrifying figure of the demon incantor right before him. Eldmia grits his teeth and realizes there is absolutely no doubt that this opponent is the most powerful demon he has ever faced. Encantor comes forward with a manic smile on his face and lunges with a powerful punch. Wrapped in a devastating dark energy, the Prota tries to defend himself with his broken sword, but the enemy's speed and strength leave him completely frozen. His eyes widen in extreme despair as he realizes he will not have enough time to dodge that brutal strike. The demon lands a direct, overwhelming punch right to Eldmia's chest, instantly knocking all the air out of his lungs. The violent impact blasts the boy hard against the stone floor, making him slide and lose his grip on his weapon. The young man's body bounces off the dungeon floor and keeps getting dragged by the force of the blow, while the enemy watches the result from afar. Eldmia lets out a cry of pain as he is launched into the air before violently colliding against the wall of the grand stone hall. The young man coughs up blood and tries to stand up with great difficulty, while someone screams out his name desperately from a distance. R'lyeh is completely horrified to see her companion defeated so easily and screams in a panic, completely lost on what to do. Encantor slowly turns his neck and locks his glowing eyes onto the mage, who tries to stand her ground while gripping her battle staff. The monster channels his purple dark energy right into the palm of his hand, getting ready to unleash another lethal attack. With a fast, intimidating leap, the demon launches himself through the air toward the young mage to finish her off. Once and for all, R'lyeh quickly raises her staff and summons a golden mana barrier to try and block the terrifying opponent's aerial rush. To the girl's absolute despair, the magic shield shatters completely under the force of the opponent's devastating punch. The young girl is struck and violently blasted backward, letting out a sharp scream as blood splatters through the air of the hall. The demon lands heavily on the stone floor and already gets ready to charge at his next target without wasting a single second. He leaps again with a clenched fist to crush the fallen mage, determined to make sure she never gets back up. The strike triggers a massive explosion that sends chunks of rock flying everywhere, kicking up a thick cloud of dust all over the place. The horned beast widens his eyes slightly as he realizes something unexpected interfered at the exact split second of his lethal attack. The dwarf Jin suddenly appears, using every bit of his physical strength to hold back the monster's arm, stopping the punch from hitting the girl. The demon is pushed back, sliding a few yards before quickly recovering his combat stance with a look of pure disdain. He quickly glances off to the side as he senses a new presence closing in at high speed through the rubble. The villain turns to face the clearing smoke, trying to identify who dared to challenge him at such a crucial moment in the battle. Two steady legs emerge from the middle of the debris, revealing that someone else is ready to step into this dangerous clash. Jin leaps down from above, holding his pickaxe with both hands, delivering a powerful downward strike straight at his opponent's head. However, the dwarf is startled and breaks into a cold sweat as he notices the demon reacted to his attack with total ease and speed. Encanter simply slips his face to the side with a mocking smile, showing that the warrior's movement was way too slow for him. With a smooth, agile spin on his foot, the monster gets ready to unleash a devastating counterattack. He lands an extremely violent kick straight to Gin's stomach, completely shutting down the brave ally's charge. The blow sends the dwarf flying backward until he crashes with immense force against one of the ancient dungeon's massive stone pillars. From a high angle, all the warriors can be seen down and defeated across the stone floor, while the demon stands imposing right in the center. Eldmia tries to push himself up from the ground and wonders in frustration where so much power is coming from, since his strength and speed are on a whole different level. The villain raises his glowing hand and points toward his horned subordinate, who is kneeling further ahead, waiting for orders. Encanter coldly orders him to finish activating the dimensional portal, and the subordinate promptly replies that he will fulfill the command. Encanter's subordinate begins to summon the massive dimensional portal, creating a swirling vortex of purple and dark energy. Throughout the hall, Eldmia notices the opponent is using mana, but he knows that alone cannot explain such an absurd power, wondering if it is some kind of special skill. He watches the enemy from afar and begins to panic, having no idea how his crew can possibly stop a monster with such destructive strength. Meanwhile, the demon leader's hand begins to crackle with a powerful purple energy, showing he still has plenty of power left to burn. Encanter clicks his tongue in irritation and clenches his fist tightly, looking impatient with how long it is taking the humans to accept their inevitable defeat. Suddenly, Eldmia's eyes widen as something clicks in his mind, and he realizes something extremely important about how this fight works. He remembers his sister's teachings about the molten metal and puts the pieces together with the technique the demon is using, reaching a breakthrough. Even severely wounded and with his face bleeding, the young hero shows a confident smile and decides he has no choice but to go for it. Eldmia digs his foot into the stone floor and sprints with all the speed he has left for one final, desperate charge. The demon notices the sudden movement and looks off to the side, surprised by the persistence of the boy he thought was already beaten. The Proto lets out a furious battle cry and charges straight at his opponent, without hesitating for even a single split second. Encanter calls him a fool and warns that if he had just stayed quiet on the ground, he might have let him crawl away alive. However, Eldmia just smiles provocatively while prepping a dirty trick hidden inside his clenched hand to catch his rival off guard. In the middle of his leap, the young man throws a large handful of sand straight into the demon's eyes to completely block his vision. Caught completely by surprise, the villain tries to blink and realizes with pure hatred that his face was hit square on by basic dust and fine sand. The demon flies into a rage over the boy's boldness, but Eldmia takes advantage of the instant opening to draw his sword with extreme speed. He plants himself right on the demon's shoulder to gain momentum and positions himself right above him with his blade raised, leaving the enemy confused. Eldmia drives his sword with brutal force right into the base of his opponent's neck, causing a massive amount of blood to spray instantly. The monster roars in extreme pain and hatred, cursing the young hero while desperately trying to shake free from that humiliating situation. Eldmia whispers right into his ear that the demon's body is just inflated with raw mana, leaving the villain in complete and utter shock. The boy explains that he is not coating himself in mana, but rather forcing it inside his own body, and that there is a clear limit to how much he can take. He goes on to say that the demon's body was already at its absolute limit, so if he injects even more mana straight inside him through the blade, Eldmia wears an insane, defying expression, goading his opponent to see what happens when his energy hits the critical breaking point. He channels his own blue mana through the sword straight into Encanter, making the demon scream in agony and order the boy to get away from him. The villain's face turns completely red and distorted from the excess power, screaming in pain as his body begins to reject the energy. The Proto refuses to back off just because he asked, promising that he will keep pumping power until the enemy's body blows up for good. Encanter grits his teeth with extreme hatred and tells the boy to feel his own destructive power right back, if that is really what he wants. The demon begins to channel a massive wave of purple energy through the palm of his free hand to unleash a point-blank counterattack. Eldmia roars back, saying he will show him the true strength of that gathered mana, completely ignoring the imminent danger of the counter. A massive amount of blood violently splatters through the air, staining the stone pillars of the Grand Hall with the sheer brutality of the impact. At that exact, crucial moment, Cheryl appears by surprise and lands a spectacular flying knee strike straight to the demon leader's face, and Cantor is left dumbfounded by the interference and wonders in extreme fury how this human is somehow still standing to fight. Cheryl completely ignores his complaint and screams with all her might for Eldmia to take the opening and finish off the monster. Once and for all, Eldmia takes advantage of his partner's perfect backup and raises his glowing blade wrapped in blue energy, preparing the final blow. The warrior Cheryl restrains the opponent's neck from behind with all her strength, while the Prota unleashes an attack in total fury. The colossal impact cracks the stone floor beneath the fighter's feet, kicking up debris from the immense pressure of the final strike, with Cheryl holding down the monster and Eldmia attacking head-on. The combination of the two triggers a violent discharge of energy upon the creature. The demon lets out a deafening scream of pain as he is hit by the explosion of blue energy that pierces and burns through his internal defenses. The horned subordinate who was managing the portal turns around, startled, and screams his leader's name upon seeing the devastating scene. Cantor, even heavily wounded and bleeding, desperately orders his subordinate to finish activating the dimensional portal, no matter the cost. The subordinate replies that he will, but panics as he sees a magical sphere of golden light appear and glow intensely right by his side. He clicks his tongue in irritation and tries to raise his hand to defend against the surprise spell that threatens to disrupt his activation ritual. A boot steps firmly onto the damp floor of the dungeon, revealing that the ally mages are moving fast to stop the enemy's plans. Rely appears from above, wielding her blue gem staff to bring down a direct attack against the demon who is manipulating the portal. The young mage roars with determination that she will absolutely not let them finish activating that dangerous dimensional passage. She delivers a perfectly aimed staff strike, loaded with magic right to the opponent's back, completely cutting off his channeling. The monster is violently blasted against the stone floor and screams in pain, while the young girl lands imposing right above him. Raleigh breaks into a cold sweat and stares down at the fallen opponent up close, keeping her guard high in case he makes any sudden moves to get up, down, and defeated. The subordinate wears a devilish smile and mockingly warns that it is already way too late for them to stop the worst. Suddenly, the purple sorcery circle beneath his body begins to glow intensely, shooting electrical sparks across the dungeon floor. The dimensional portal expands even further, glowing with a chaotic purple energy and releasing electrical discharges all across the dungeon hall. A blinding light consumes the room, while Eldmia and Cheryl try to hold their ground against the immense pressure generated by the portal's activation. The young hero screams in despair as he realizes the enemy's teleportation portal has finally opened up completely right in front of them. However, Cantor wears a devilish, triumphant smile, knowing he fulfilled his main goal despite all the human's efforts. Suddenly, the demon leader's body begins to glow unstably, gathering an absurd amount of pent-up energy all at once. He lets out a monstrous roar while Eldmia still tries to hold him down, forcing the last of his energy to release an overwhelming counterattack. The boy notices the danger just in time and realizes in shock that his opponent is trying to expand his inner power even further to cause a disaster. A massive explosion of purple energy occurs, violently blasting Eldmia and Cheryl backward. Due to the brutal shockwave, Eldmia manages to slide across the floor and steady himself, initially thinking it was a suicidal move, but soon realizes the intention was entirely different. He grits his teeth and gets ready to act fast, knowing every single second is crucial to prevent the absolute worst from happening right there. The young man realizes the demon simply discharged all his remaining mana to push them away by force and clear a path for his strategic escape. Cantor sprints desperately toward the portal that just opened up, determined to escape back to his safe territory. Eldmia grips his sword firmly and mutters in anger, realizing right away that his opponent's plan now is simply to tuck tail and run. The demon laughs out loud and screams in victory that opening the portal secures their win, sealing the fate of the human's precious kingdom. However, the villain suddenly feels a chill run down his spine and looks back in a total panic, noticing an extremely terrifying presence closing in. Eldmia stands tall and imposing, completely wrapped in a glowing aura of blue magic power. With a bloodthirsty look in his eyes, the young man roars furiously that he will never let the demon leave this place alive after everything he did to him and his companions. The hero steps down hard with his boot wrapped in mana and takes off at an impressive speed that defies his own body's limits. He launches himself forward like a swift blue blur, leaving a trail of dust and cutting wind behind him in the dungeon hall. Cantor widens his eyes in extreme panic, realizing he will not have enough time to cross the portal before getting caught by the boy's fury. In a fraction of a second, Eldmia appears in the air right above his opponent and delivers a lightning-fast, precise diagonal slash. The sharp blue blade cuts through the air flawlessly and strikes right through the demon leader's neck before he can even manage a reaction. The strike decapitates the villain instantly, making a massive amount of blood spray out, while Eldmia keeps moving forward with the momentum. Due to the overwhelming speed of his charge, Eldmia ends up crossing right through the active dimensional portal and vanishes into the light along with the body. The prota clenches his teeth hard as he is sucked in by the heavy magic energy of the dimensional passage he just crossed. He is completely pulled over to the other side, while his companion Cheryl's voice echoes desperately, calling out his name from far away. Cheryl tries to crawl across the stone floor in a panic and screams desperately for Eldmia, realizing the young hero just crossed the enemy portal. Meanwhile, on the other side of the portal, inside a rocky canyon under a blood-red sky, an army of demons anxiously awaits the return. One of the subordinates celebrates with a loud laugh that the portal is open and perfectly stable, declaring their operation a complete success. The commander, Lord Dakin, commandingly orders them to get everything ready to march the very second his younger brother returns with the unit. He smiles confidently and comments with pride that the plan would obviously work out. After all, Encanter is his younger brother. Suddenly, the swirl of purple energy activates at full force right in front of them, announcing that someone is about to cross the passage. Dakan celebrates, saying that Lord Encanter is finally back with the good news. Expecting to see his victorious brother emerge at any moment, a boot steps firmly onto the stone ramp outside the portal, instantly drawing the attention of all the demons waiting at the site. To everyone's absolute surprise, the one emerging through the passage is the young Eldmia. Holding his sword and surrounded by residues of pure blue energy, Lord Dakin widens his eyes and is left completely jaw-dropped as he realizes that boy is definitely not his brother Encanter. The demon soldiers begin to whisper in confusion and fear, completely unable to understand how a mere human managed to come out of the portal alive right after. Something round and bloody rolls out from inside the dimensional portal and lands heavily on the ground right behind the young hero. The mysterious object rolls a bit more across the canyon floor and stops right in front of the army, revealing itself to be Encanter's severed head. Commander Dakan locks his eyes onto it and falls into a complete state of shock, instantly recognizing his own brother's features. He stands frozen with his pupils trembling before that brutal, unexpected scene that completely destroyed their plans of conquest. The soldiers around him begin to break into a cold sweat and mutter in disbelief that this is impossible and cannot be happening for real. One of them screams in horror as he recognizes his fallen leader's head, confirming that the fearsome Lord Encanter has been summarily executed. Panic spreads, and they wonder how a human boy managed to single-handedly defeat a demon warrior of such a high and powerful class. They look terrified at Eldmia's dark figure and ask themselves desperately who that monstrous human standing before them is. One of the demon officers anxiously asks Lord Dakan what the combat orders are now that the absolute worst-case scenario has come true. Dakan lowers his head while a dark shadow covers his face, shaking with pure hatred and murderous rage over his younger brother's demise. The commander explodes into a deafening roar of anger, asking what that brat thinks he did to his precious younger brother Eldmia, remains standing still at the top of the portal stairs, calmly staring down the entire troop of enemy demons surrounding him in the canyon. With his face completely covered in blood, the young man just cracks an insane, terrifying smile, showing he is ready for the next massacre. The prota thinks to himself that even though he knew about the demon's presence here, the actual situation is way more worrying than he imagined. He looks at the massive enemy horde in front of him and admits to himself that he never expected to find so many demon soldiers gathered all at once. Eldmia grips the handle of his sword and realizes he spent almost all his magic power in the previous fight. Knowing he will not be able to hold out for long, Lord Dakan shakes with hatred upon seeing the hero and yells furiously at the boy, unable to accept the boldness of that insolent human. The commander draws his weapon and screams that what he did to his brother is unforgivable, promising he will tear him to pieces right there without an ounce of mercy. He keeps ranting and promises that after he finishes off Eldmia, he will march through the portal to wipe out every last human in the kingdom. Eldmia keeps his head down for a moment, letting the blood drip down his face while processing the demon leader's terrifying threat. With a provocative touch, the young man challenges his opponent to go right ahead and try, leaving the demon commander quite confused by that calm reaction. The young man points behind him and says they are completely misreading the situation.
Asking if they really thought the kingdom did not know about this secret hideout bluffing, he warns that hundreds of elite knights are waiting for them on the other side and suggests that if the monsters do not want to die, they should run right now. Startled, a subordinate asks Dakan what they should do, fearing the threat might be real since the powerful Encanter ended up defeated. The commander weighs the potential presence of the royal army in silence,
trying to evaluate if the boy is just bluffing to buy some time. Eldmia focuses his gaze on the blade of his sword, which already shows severe cracks and is about to break completely at any moment. Dakin lets out a sarcastic laugh as he notices the hero's hesitation and mockingly asks if those elite troops actually exist. With a dark smile, the commander orders them to bring the special device immediately, and his subordinate runs to fulfill the command. Eldmia gets a bad feeling and goes on high alert, trying to guess what kind of new evil plan the enemy is cooking up. a demon appears pushing a massive wooden transport structure, revealing a giant spherical object that radiates a terrifying energy. The Proto widens his eyes in complete shock upon spotting the mysterious artifact and realizing the gravity of the situation. He is horrified by the absurd amount of magic power packed inside that giant sphere. The enemies brought out Daikon smiles and comments that he intended to use that as a bargaining chip in negotiations, but decides to change strategies now that they have been discovered. He screams insanely that the humans brought this on themselves and promises to turn the entire realm of men into an absolute sea of flames. The subordinate tries to warn him that they still do not have permission from the high command to use the weapon, but is instantly silenced by the commander's shout. Daikon grabs his ally by the shoulder and warns that, facing hundreds of enemy elite soldiers, they are up against an unprecedented crisis. The commander states with madness in his eyes that the change of plans is logical, and that his superiors will certainly understand the need for that measure. Eldmia realizes in despair that his bluff made the situation worse, and that the problem has blown up to a scale far greater than he could have ever predicted. He analyzes the magic sphere packed tightly with dense mana and concludes, without a shadow of a doubt, that the object is a devastating bomb. The young man pictures the colossal catastrophe that would happen if that weapon of mass destruction were detonated right in the middle of the human kingdom. With that, he finally understands that the true purpose of building the dimensional portal was precisely to transport that terrible bomb. The young man grits his teeth in deep anger as he realizes the cruelty of the enemy's plans, cursing the demons for going way too far with their malice. Daikon orders his soldiers to throw the boy back through the portal along with the explosive artifact to show the kingdom their true power. Following the command, the entire enemy troop advances aggressively, pushing the giant bomb toward the portal where Eldmia is positioned. The army marches relentlessly against the wounded Prota, cornering the young hero without leaving any room for a potential escape. Eldmia gathers the last of his energy and decides that no matter what happens to his own body, he needs to stop that threat at this very instant. A painful memory of his home burning in the past flashes in his mind, strengthening his promise to never let such a tragedy happen again. Surrounded by armed enemies and with the active portal at his back, the hero finds himself out of options and tries to find a viable way out of this standoff. Suddenly, a bright light and the sound of an impact come from inside the active magic passage, catching the attention of everyone present in the canyon. Eldmia quickly turns around, surprised by the sudden shift in energy coming from the magic opening at his back. In spectacular fashion, the warrior Ekaterina emerges leaping from the portal with her giant hammer, accompanied by the other allies coming to help him. Ekaterina apologizes for the delay and comments that it took a bit longer than expected to find a proper weapon for the fight. The new warriors arrive attacking at full force, plowing through the demon's defensive lines and creating absolute chaos among the enemies. His companions yell that they will hold off the weaker soldiers and tell Eldmia to focus on dealing with the main threat in the area. Relieved and motivated by the arrival of his loyal friends, the Prota breaks into a wide smile and fully recovers his determination to fight. He decides to gamble everything on this risky move and charges steadily toward the magic bomb, prepping his final, decisive attack. Daikon realizes he was tricked and screams furiously as he sees that those were the supposed elite soldiers the human boy had mentioned earlier. Eldmia knows he will only get one single shot at landing the blow and decides to focus every remaining fragment of his raw blue mana straight into the blade. He lets out a roar of determination with all the strength in his lungs, completely ignoring the wounds and extreme exhaustion he feels in his body. The young man runs at full speed toward the energy core of the demon's massive weapon of mass destruction. In total fury, he delivers a devastating sword strike against the sphere's magic structure to try and deactivate the mechanism for good. The rival commander laughs out loud and mocks the hero, stating that the bomb was engineered to resist any ordinary attack that does not use pure, raw mana. The tip of Eldmia's sword shatters on impact, but the dense gathered energy begins to pierce through the shell of the dangerous enemy artifact. Lord Daikon is left completely dumbfounded and open-mouthed as he witnesses the boy's attack, unable to believe what is happening right before him. Eldmia's broken blade collides with the enemy device's protective magic barrier, sending a wave of cracks across the glowing shield. The demon soldiers scream in despair as they realize a mere human was able to break through such a powerful mana barrier with his bare hands. The rip in the protective barrier spreads rapidly across the entire surface, shooting off electrical sparks of gathered mana due to the impact, with a loud snap. The large bomb's protective shield shatters completely under the crushing force of the blue energy channeled by Eldmia. Eldmia smiles with determination and celebrates having managed to breach the enemy defense at the absolute last second, despite the extreme fatigue he feels. The enemy soldiers fall into a general panic and yell for everyone to pull back immediately, as the unstable artifact is about to detonate on the spot. While all of his subordinates run to save their lives, Commander Daikon remains frozen in the exact same spot, washed over by the intense glow. He wonders in shock how a mere human could master pure mana like that and shatter a magic barrier that was supposed to be indestructible. Completely exhausted and without a single shred of energy left, the Prota collapses heavily onto his knees against the rocky canyon floor. He realizes in despair that his legs simply will not respond anymore and that his body has locked up entirely due to the extreme effort of the battle. The young man laments to himself for pushing his magic power way past its bearable limit, leaving him completely vulnerable and unable to move. His eyes widen as he sees the bomb's violent glow intensify, knowing the detonation will go off in a split second. The magic device begins to release devastating waves of energy, indicating that the core's final explosion is absolutely unavoidable. Eldmia accepts his fate for a brief moment, but is caught by surprise when several familiar hands suddenly reach out toward him in the middle of the chaos. His loyal party members grab him firmly by his cloak and arms. Determined to not leave him behind in that canyon, the allies pull the Prota back through the active dimensional portal at the absolute last possible second before the massive detonation of the artifact. An explosion of colossal proportions consumes the demon's territory, completely devastating the entire canyon with an overwhelming shockwave of heat. Dakin and his army are completely swallowed by the destructive light of the magic bomb's explosion, the very weapon they had brought for the invasion. The impact obliterates the rocks and vanishes any trace of the enemy troops present at the site, sealing the tragic fate of that entire battalion. On the other side, the portal inside the kingdom's abandoned dungeon begins to flicker violently due to the immense energy released by the external explosion. The group of heroes is violently spit out of the magic passage and falls messily onto the damp stone floor of the ancient royal dungeon. Eldmia falls completely unconscious and heavily wounded onto the stone floor, while the portal behind him begins to close up for good. The young hero's vision begins to darken rapidly, and he blacks out completely, giving in to the extreme fatigue after surviving the terrifying battle. The Prota slowly begins to regain consciousness in the middle of the darkness, letting out a groan of pain due to the injuries across his body. Upon opening his eyes, Eldmia finds himself looking at an unfamiliar ceiling and notices he is lying in a clean bed with medical bandages wrapping his entire chest. He slowly sits up in bed and notices he is in a well-equipped hospital room, thinking to himself that blacking out like this has already become a common habit for him. Suddenly, footsteps approach, and a friendly voice says they are relieved to see the young hero finally wake up after being out cold for so long. Eldmia recognizes Walter, who explains that the boy is in the royal capital's hospital and that he was brought there by his mission companions. The elite assassin apologizes for what happened, admitting they knew about the enemy plan, but never expected the presence of such a high-class demon. He goes on to say that he has already heard the details of the entire operation through the other survivors and knows about the attempted activation of the portal. Walter adds that the monsters were trying to bring through an extremely dangerous secret weapon and that the invasion was only stopped thanks to Eldmia's heroism. The man takes a respectful bow and gives thanks on behalf of the entire kingdom, but Eldmia humbly says he was only able to win because of his party. Showing immediate concern for his friends, the young man hastily asks if all the other members of his team are doing well. Health-wise, Walter reassures the boy, letting him know that everyone recovered quickly, but asks them to keep a low profile since this was a classified mission. The Prota sighs thoughtfully, realizing that even after saving the kingdom from a massive catastrophe, they are still forced to lay low. The elite assassin shifts his tone of voice and warns that the real reason for his visit goes way beyond just expressing the kingdom's official gratitude. He reveals that he brings a very special offer from the High Command. Making Eldmia instantly suspicious of the sudden change of subject, Walter steps a bit closer to the young hero's bedside and states seriously that he prefers to be straightforward and get right to the main point of the talk. The man formally announces that the kingdom wishes to appoint Eldmia Ega as an official knight of the royal court due to his immense bravery in battle. He explains that the boy's fighting capability and strategic judgment far exceed his age, and that the leaders see immense potential in him. Walter adds that many influential counselors back his appointment, and that his great deeds in the dungeon deserve to be properly rewarded. Eldmia listens to the proposal in silence while biting his finger, thinking very analytically about the terms of such a rare opportunity. The boy cracks a subtle smirk on the side of his mouth and gives a vague agreement to the assassin's words before making his actual final decision. To Walter's complete surprise, the young man promptly turns down the offer, stating very calmly that he would rather pass on that deal. Eldmia explains that the true intentions behind that night invitation are way too obvious and blatant for him to just blindly accept. Walter assumes a serious and confused expression, directly asking the young man what he is trying to suggest with that insinuation about the kingdom's plans. The Prota puts his feet down onto the infirmary's wooden floor and decides to speak with total honesty about what is truly happening in the country. He points out that the kingdom of Adiciel is being pushed against the wall and that their situation in the conflict against the demon army is critical. The assassin breaks into a cold sweat and is left completely speechless, realizing the wounded young man accurately read the terrible military crisis they are facing. He argues that the kingdom knew about the presence of demons near the capital, and instead of sending the army, sent inexperienced adventurers under the excuse of discretion. The boy states that the mission was just a front to cover up how bad the war actually is, because the royal court has no more troops available for combat. He accuses the kingdom of being so desperate that they are trying to bribe a nameless adventurer with a knighthood, solely with the intention of keeping him under strict control. Eldmia makes it clear that he has no interest in serving as a meat shield for Walter's corrupt superiors, and warns that if that is what they expect from him, they should look for another hero Walter counters, saying that the title of knight would help immensely in his fight against the demons. But the young man hits back, stating that how he fights is his own choice. With a sharp, relentless gaze, the boy highlights with determination that the same goes for how he intends to achieve his much-desired personal revenge. Walter takes a deep sigh and calls out to the boy seriously, showing that he perfectly understands the distrust he holds for the kingdom's leadership. The elite assassin openly admits that the army is short-staffed and that the country's situation is critical, choosing not to deny the facts presented by the boy. However, he guarantees that the kingdom does not just hand out knighthoods to anyone, and claims they truly believe Eldmia is someone they need. Walter assures him that the army will not try to interfere with his choices, but warns the young hero to not forget that there are many powerful eyes watching his every move. Eldmia locks his determined gaze and absorbs the warning seriously, fully aware that his actions in the ancient dungeon caught the attention of very influential people at court. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the bustling royal capital, showing the beautiful ancient buildings and the steady flow of citizens through the stone streets. The prota walks calmly through the commercial city and is suddenly surprised to spot a very familiar figure waiting for him on a corner. He runs into the warrior Cheryl, who is leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and a quite bored, impatient facial expression. Eldmia smiles brightly and jokes that he is quite touched that she went through the trouble of personally coming to pick him up outside the capital's hospital. Cheryl stares back at him in silence with an analytical, mysterious look, without showing any immediate reaction to her teammates' playful teasing. The young man gets awkward from the lack of a response, and sheepishly asks what the meaning behind that serious, grumpy face she is making is. The warrior woman sighs and says he looks pretty lively for someone who faced powerful demons, quickly turning her back while the boy asks where she is going. She just tells him to follow her without asking unnecessary questions, warning that there is a highly important place where she needs to make a quick stop. The two enter a large military establishment packed with wooden barrels containing various types of swords, battle axes, and heavy armor plates. Eldmia looks around curiously and asks awkwardly if the place she wanted to visit was just a simple commercial weapon shop in the royal capital. Cheryl explains that his sword broke back in the dungeon and reveals that her father, Sir Ecaf, ordered them to prepare a new one, telling him to pick the best weapon in stock. The boy is surprised and grateful for Lord Ecaf's generosity, putting his hand to his chin as he agrees and starts thinking about the ideal type of blade for his style. He approaches the counter and grabs the attention of the local blacksmith, who stops his work for a moment to attend to the new customer with a curious look. Eldmia asks if there is any sword capable of handling a force greater than the aura itself, leaving the shopkeeper startled and asking if the young man plans on hunting dragons. The boy comments that he hoped to find something of dwarven make, but the blacksmith apologizes and warns that the establishment does not carry such expensive merchandise in stock. Overhearing the conversation, Cheryl steps in irritated and berates her partner for getting way too ahead of himself, reminding him she said to pick the best weapon, not to go overboard like that. She adds that he is not going into combat tomorrow and tells the boy to pick something reasonable, making Eldmia accept the lecture with a compliant sigh. While they talk in the shop, the small dwarf Jin secretly watches the two from behind a wooden support beam, without either of them noticing. Shortly after, the scene shows the imposing and exquisite front of Lady Lagnus's mansion, located in one of the noble and safest areas of the royal capital. The property's butler serves tea to the two and asks them to wait, friendly commenting that this must be Eldmia's first visit to the luxurious mansion. Eldmia comments to Cheryl that the Margrave is always so busy that they barely get to properly greet her whenever they are in the royal capital. While sipping his cup of tea, the prota suddenly hears a noise from outside and expresses confusion. Turning his attention to the large window, he spots a unit of unfamiliar knights in the courtyard, and Cheryl explains that they are soldiers from the Eshnoa Empire, which formally invited the Margrave. The young man gets confused by the mention of the Empire and questions the reason behind the invitation to Rivi, but Cheryl admits she does not know the details beyond their interest in the local situation. The blonde adds that before heading out on the diplomatic trip, Rivi insisted on hearing the dungeon reports straight from him, which was the reason she brought him there. A detailed map shows that the Eshnoa Empire is the nation that holds the largest share of territory among all lands belonging to humans in the world. Commanding the most powerful armed forces known to date, the sovereign imperial nation dictates the military pace of the entire known continent. The major factor that truly sets the empire apart from all other rival nations is the fact that only that land is capable of raising and training true heroes. Suddenly, the sound of the main doors opening catches Eldmia's attention, and he curiously turns his neck to see who is entering the grand meeting hall. The young Revi appears smiling, wearing her exquisite official Margrave uniform, and greets Eldmia happily, commenting that it has been a long time since their last meeting. The noblewoman greets the blonde warrior right after, while Cheryl answers very politely and respectfully, thanking Lady Lagnus for the reception. Eldmia jokes, saying he does not know much about noble etiquette, but notices Revi looks a lot more mature now, causing her to react shyly and embarrassedly. The boy states that he is very happy they can finally see each other again, and the Margrave agrees that it has been no easy feat to schedule an official meeting lately. He acknowledges his friend's effort and friendly comments that she must have gone through a lot to reach her current leadership position in the kingdom. Revi smiles affectionately and says that, in reality, working as a Margrave constantly reminds her of her late father, and that this feeling of closeness makes her very happy. She shifts to a serious posture and explains that the true reason for calling him there is to hear the full story about the demon infiltration and how it links to the Empire. Eldmia accepts the request and decides to report everything from the beginning, starting from the crucial moment of hunting down the bandits at the royal winery facilities. After listening to the whole report in silence, Revi concludes with worry that the situation is far worse than the authorities imagined, as the enemies are already in the core of the kingdom. The noblewoman puts her hand to her chin thoughtfully and concludes that, faced with this terrible infiltration scenario at court, the real motive behind the Empire's invitation is actually something else. The boy notices the noblewoman went extremely quiet and asks, with a cold sweat, if he accidentally said something wrong to make her that way. Revi keeps a melancholy look and apologizes to the Prota, shyly revealing that she needs to ask a very important favor of him. She asks Eldmia to accompany her on her diplomatic trip to the Empire to meet the legendary chosen hero, leaving the young man completely shocked. The scene shifts to a glowing, stable blue magic portal that has just been activated in the center of the main courtyard for their trip. Eldmia crosses the magic passage wearing his new blue official Royal Guard uniform, maintaining an imposing stance with his sword at his waist. The young man widens his eyes and is left completely bedazzled as he takes his first steps into the unfamiliar territory of the new nation. Before him stands a massive, lavish cathedral of Gothic architecture, whose white spires seem to reach the clouds in the blue sky. A beautiful aerial view reveals the entire coastal vastness of Vistim Tel Nua, the magnificent and prosperous capital of the sovereign Ishnoa Empire. Suddenly, Eldmia hears an uncomfortable groan right behind him and turns around with a worried expression to see what happened. He runs into Revi, who is completely dizzy and carsick from the magic travel, complaining that her stomach is still spinning non-stop. The young noblewoman gets flushed cheeks and a comically beaten expression, struggling to recover her balance after crossing the portal. Through the busy streets of the Empire, citizens wearing elegant clothes stroll calmly, oblivious to the dangers plaguing the rest of the world. Revi comments happily about the peace of that place, while Eldmia agrees that it seems to be the pinnacle of the greatest human civilization in existence. The noblewoman says it is hard to believe there is still a terrible war happening somewhere in the world, leaving the Prota thoughtful. Shifting the tone of the talk, the young man asks seriously if they are truly safe traveling with such a small entourage to the location. He points out that there are only 5 people in the entire crew, and highlights that he is the only bodyguard tasked with securing her safety. Revi explains that an armed escort would raise unnecessary suspicion at the diplomatic meeting, making Eldmia agree with her logic. Suddenly, a shadow casts before them, and an imposing voice announces that they were already anxiously awaiting the Margrave's arrival. A very elegant man formally introduces himself as Marquis Esdel Labenda, welcoming them and offering to be their official guide. Revi takes a noble bow and gives thanks for the personal reception, stating it is the least they can do as representatives of the Odysseal kingdom. The Marquis notices the Prota's presence and questions who he is, and Revi explains that the young man is her guard and personal assistant on the trip. Esdel narrows his golden eyes in an extremely sharp, suspicious manner, analyzing the boy's stance behind that simple disguise. Noticing the silent tension in the air, the young hero lets out a quite awkward laugh to try and ease the heavy mood of the moment. The Marquis drops the serious gaze and friendly notes that he has already prepared a luxurious carriage to take them, inviting them to begin the ride. Revi gently thanks him for the host's hospitality, while Eldmia accompanies her right behind with an attentive, vigilant expression. Already settled in the carriage, Eldmia recalls the previous conversation and wonders what his friend truly meant by meeting their hero in the memory. Revi reveals that the true purpose of the Empire's invitation was not just to gather intel on the recent demon attacks. She explains that the Imperial authorities want her to meet the chosen hero and collaborate directly in his training for a whole week. The young man gets confused and questions why they chose her of all people, but the noblewoman admits she does not know, theorizing it might be for magic support. Eldmia crosses his arms and grumbles that they are weird, questioning if they were called out just to watch a show-off demonstration. He begins to analyze the facts in deep silence and realizes there is an obvious hidden agenda behind that training invitation. The boy concludes that the Empire is parading its greatest war asset before a weakened kingdom just to flaunt its military superiority. The The prota voices his thought out loud, concluding that such an arrogant attitude from the imperial leaders amounts to a provocation. Revi fully agrees and adds that it is a clear, silent threat, so that the small kingdom of Idiciel does not try any reckless moves. She laments that such a grand nation has leaders with such petty minds, while Eldmia answers that this is the dirty game of politics. The young hero concludes that the rulers are already planning the post-war division of the world, and certainly intend to place the kingdom under their influence. Back in the present, the boy watches the view from the carriage window and reflects seriously on the possibility of a political annexation. The coachman announces that they have arrived at the prestigious Elios Academy and notes that the noblewoman will attend classes there. As a temporary student during the week, Eldmia and Revi walk together through the lavish hallways of the educational institution, admiring the impressive infrastructure of the place. The prota is impressed by the luxury of the academy where the hero studies, admitting it is far more sophisticated than the schools in his kingdom. Revi suddenly cracks a joyful smile and exclaims in surprise upon spotting a quite familiar person standing at the end of the large entrance hallway. The noblewoman runs happily toward a robust man with a gray beard and calls him master, while the veteran welcomes her with open arms, commenting, "It has been a long time." The old man jokes if he should call her Margrave Lagnus now, but the girl laughs gently and answers affectionately that her magic master never changes. She turns to Eldmia and introduces the veteran as the teacher who taught her the magic arts in her childhood, and the prota observes the man with respect. The man extends his hand warmly and introduces himself as Ragnell Bandes, revealing he is a mage of the Idiciel royal court and a teacher at the prestigious academy. Eldmia shakes his hand with a friendly smile, but thinks to himself if that muscular, imposing fellow is truly just a magic user. Ragnall lets out a genuine laugh and comments that he finally met the famous Eldmia he has heard so much about, admitting he thought he was a warrior. The veteran praises the determination in the young man's gaze, while Eldmia jokes that Ragnall looks way too strong and robust to be classified as just a mage. The teacher laughs out loud and good-humoredly agrees with the young man's observation, citing the old saying that a sound mind always demands an equally strong, healthy body. Ragnall notes he was briefed by the imperial authorities and guarantees he will support the two during their stay, leaving Eldmia comfortable to ask any questions. The scene shifts to the massive inner training courtyard of the Imperial Academy, where students and instructors begin to gather for the start of daily activities. Ragnall asks if all the students have arrived for the practical demonstration, and his assistant notes that almost everyone is present, with only the hero missing. The teacher sighs in irritation over the boy's delay on such an important day, complaining that he had ordered him to arrive early for the proper introductions. The other students in the class grumble with disdain about the hero's constant lateness, sourly commenting that his massive ego needs a reality check. While listening to the spiteful comments of the students around him, Eldmia watches the talk closely, trying to understand the social dynamics of that prestigious academy. The prota finds the tense mood of the environment strange, and thinks that, for a place meant to house humanity's greatest savior, the atmosphere feels pretty uncomfortable. Out of nowhere, a relaxed, mocking voice echoes through the entrance of the training hall. Apologizing for the slight delay in the special entourage's arrival, Eldmia and the Margrave Revi instantly look toward the voice that cut off everyone's conversation, showing curiosity to see the figure who just arrived. The hero of the Empire makes a flashy entrance with his arms over the shoulders of two female teammates, oozing an arrogant, extremely slacker attitude. Seeing that flashy, unprofessional stance, Eldmia breaks into a cold sweat and wonders in shock if that fellow with delinquent behavior is truly the hero. The boy with spiky red hair observes the newly arrived group with a confident, smug smile plastered on his face, analyzing the delegation from the kingdom. The hero locks his eyes directly onto Revi's figure and cheekily comments that if he knew she was so beautiful, he definitely would have made it a point to arrive sooner. He approaches and asks if she is the Margrave who will serve as his sparring partner, while the noblewoman politely replies, formally introducing herself as Lagnus. The fellow praises her beauty and questions why nobody warned him sooner, while the young Margrave just makes a polite bow, ignoring the hero's informal stance. The redhead looks slyly and asks if the girl is free after classes to spend some time together with him, leaving the mood of the place visibly uncomfortable. He cheekily rests his hand on Revi's shoulder and suggests they visit a great local tavern in the capital to chat more casually in private. In that exact instant, Eldmia grabs the hero's wrist with force, blocking the unwanted touch and leaving the noblewoman quite surprised by her young protector's agile reaction. The hero of the Empire is caught off guard by the sudden block and looks at the boy with a dark, irritated face. While a threatening energy begins to rise in the air, Eldmia stares the fellow in the eyes and asks with extreme coldness and hostility if he happens to have some wish to die young to dare touch the Margrave like that. The prota's boldness leaves the instructors and all the other students present in the hall in a complete panic, fearing the severe consequences of that direct provocation. The hero smiles dangerously and mockingly questions if the young bodyguard actually knows what kind of important, powerful person he is daring to speak to. Eldmia completely ignores the implicit threat and squeezes the opponent's wrist with even more force, forcing the hero to let out a grumble of pain due to the pressure applied. Surprising everyone, the redhead bursts into a laugh and praises the young man's guts, finding his attitude very funny and loosening his combat stance right after he asks Revi who the bold fellow is, and the noblewoman answers seriously that Eldmia is her personal bodyguard assigned by the kingdom to secure her safety. The hero smiles and comments that the kingdom finally sent someone interesting, since the other foreign visitors used to shake in fear of him and were boring. The prota glares at him coldly and says it does not matter what he finds funny, but demands that the hero show at least the basic respect necessary toward the Margrave. Ragnall steps in to end the argument between the youths, calming tempers, and reminding everyone that they have not even finished the formal introductions yet. The master places his hand on Eldmia's shoulder and asks him to not get carried away by emotions in training, reminding him there are many officials watching the group in that hall. Ragnall severely reprimands the hero about his lack of manners, reminding him that courtesy is part of a hero's duty. While the red-haired boy just agrees with disdain, Eldmia observes the spoiled, sloppy behavior of the fellow with an extremely serious, suspicious gaze, keeping his guard up about his true capability. The assistant takes the floor to change the subject and officially announces that the Margrave of the Idiciel Kingdom came to directly support the hero's training. Revi takes a step forward and formally introduces herself as Lagnus Lienda, Reviant, expressing that it is an immense pleasure to be able to collaborate with the Empire in this special training. The Academy students whisper in the background about her last name, spitefully recalling that the Reviant family was almost completely wiped out by the Demon King's army. Another student comments sarcastically that he wants to see how long the noblewoman can last in training, making Revi feel the weight of those hostile comments. Ragnall shuts down the side conversations and orders the assistant instructors to set up the necessary magic structure to immediately kick off the practical combat class. The four-eyed assistant kneels down and activates a large blue sorcery circle on the checkered floor of the hall, announcing he will summon the simulated combat arena. Beams of glowing blue light shoot up toward the high ceiling, launching the sophisticated materialization process of the virtual battlefield developed by the Empire. A solid pillar of magic energy rises in the center of the arena and begins to grow rapidly, spreading a strong gust of mana that wows the spectators. At the top of that glowing structure, a massive pinkish energy halo forms and begins to float steadily in the air, expanding the simulation barrier. The magic circle expands circularly throughout the perimeter of the training hall, completing the holographic projection process of the sophisticated arena. A bluish, translucent platform of mana materializes over the checkered floor, serving as the official bounded area where students will conduct the duels. Eldmia observes the ceiling with great curiosity and asks the assistant instructor what the true purpose of that mysterious energy ring floating above them is. The assistant explains smilingly that the device is a product of magic engineering and uses illusion and sensory interference to create highly realistic combat simulations. The prota shows quite a bit of confusion at the technical explanation, but the instructor friendly notes that it will be much easier to understand if he sees it in practice. Ragnall takes command of the arena and calls students Mari and Luis to kick off the test demonstration duel, ordering them to generate their respective simulation weapons. Answering the command, the young Luis extends his right hand and makes a shining sword of pure blue mana materialize out of nowhere, straight into his clenched fist. Right after, the student Mari also extends her arms downward and summons a glowing pink staff of concentrated magic energy to serve as backup in the duel. Eldmia is completely jaw-dropped and in shock, witnessing the youths materialize full weapons out of absolute nothing. Impressed by the Empire's technology, Professor Ragnell gestures with his hand in a fast, authoritative manner, giving the official starting signal for the students to begin the simulation combat. Without wasting time, Luis leaps toward his opponent wielding his glowing blue sword to deliver the first attacking blow of the training match. Mari prepares her attack by gathering power at the tip of her staff, which begins to glow heavily with a golden circle. She fires a devastating beam of golden light straight toward her opponent in the simulated training arena. Luis manages to dodge the magic beam with agility, charging forward with his blue mana sword wielded for the counterattack. The two students clash in combat, with the fellow delivering a sword strike that is blocked up close by the girl's staff. Eldmia observes the duel from afar with a quite serious face. Surprised by the intensity of the two fighters' movements, he thinks to himself that the two are fighting as if they are truly trying to end each other and that it barely looks like a simulation. Suddenly, Luis feels a heavy impact and complains of pain in his leg, realizing he ended up getting hit. Mari takes advantage of the opening with a confident smile and says she got him, preparing another glowing magic circle to finish it. She fires an attack that triggers a large golden explosion, hitting the opponent's body square in the center of the arena. Eldmia is horrified and asks if his upper body was wiped out, but the assistant asks him to keep watching. The hit youth's body begins to disintegrate into small golden particles of mana, revealing the nature of the simulation. Luis laments his defeat out loud as he notices his virtual avatar completely dissolved in the training arena. Ragnar closes the duel, declaring Mari as the grand winner of the match. While the defeated youth sighs relieved on the floor, Eldmia asks confused what just happened, and the assistant explains that everything is just an illusion created by the red ring. The assistant explains that the simulation device distorts the location with light and reads the person's intent to project what they imagine. He goes on to say that the system can reproduce weapons, magic, wounds, pain, and even the skill level of each user. Thanks to this incredible simulation technology, the Academy students can gain real combat experience in a totally safe manner. Eldmia is impressed by the advancement of Imperial magic and thinks that the power gap compared to his kingdom is like heaven and earth. The assistant suggests that the Margrave try next, but Ragnar steps in saying she traveled from afar and should rest for today. The four-eyed fellow stutters, saying it is a direct order from the Marquis, making Ragnar seriously question that demand. Ragnar glances away with a tense face as he notices there are ulterior motives behind that sudden order. The old master looks toward the upper balcony of the hall to identify who is watching their training from up there. Up on the balcony, Marquis Esdel silently observes all the movement in the arena with an imposing, mysterious posture. Someone approaches Esdel, commenting that it has been a while since they last saw each other, and asks who the opponent will be to face the young Margrave. Esdel says they have not decided yet, but that he ordered Lady Ethelua for the duel, scoffing at the importance of a simple Margrave. The white-haired woman agrees with the choice of Ethelua and mockingly smiles, while the two keep talking about the match's direction. She adds that they must show the foreign noblewoman exactly what her true place is. Revi hears the distant comments and maintains a steady face, focusing her attention on what she needs to do in the arena. Ragnar says their trick is way too obvious and warns he will speak with the Marquise, while the assistant nervously tries to argue. Interrupting their talk, Revi takes a step forward with determination and firmly asks to let her fight already. Ragnar tries to calm her, saying there is no need to force herself, but the young girl smiles and guarantees everything is perfectly fine. She asks with a defying smile who he thinks trained her, leaving the old master proud and compliant with her decision. The assistant announces that the opponent will be Ethelua and asks out loud for the young lady to get ready immediately to enter the battlefield. Ethelua asks if she does not need to hold back in the duel, and the hero of the Empire just answers she can do whatever she pleases. The hero blinks cockily and commentingly remarks in an arrogant manner that the only person there who truly interests him at the moment is... He fixes his gaze steadily toward Eldmia, who remains standing beside the arena. Observing all the movement around, Eldmia asks if she is absolutely sure about this since it is a clear trap, but Revi says they both knew it would end like this from the start. With a fearless smile on her face, the noblewoman states that since that is the case, they are just going to face this provocation head-on. The assistant kicks off the simulated battle between Margrave Revi and Ethelua, ordering the two to generate their respective weapons already. Ethelua agilely extends her hand and makes a large, glowing magic staff wrapped in an intense greenish energy appear out of thin air. Revi also concentrates and materializes a simulation spear that radiates a strong reddish coloring directly into her right hand. Eldmia goes rigid with worry and wonders what that idiot is thinking, since she has never stepped into a real fight before. Ragnar finds the situation amusing and jokes if Revi was pretending to be a frail girl around him, leaving the young man confused by the question. The old man smiles mysteriously and just tells the young man to keep watching closely to discover her true power. The four-eyed assistant raises his right hand in the air and yells with enthusiasm to declare the official start of that awaited duel. Ethelua immediately advances with a fast, aggressive step, wanting to catch her opponent by surprise in the very first seconds. She charges in the air, delivering a strike, and warns she will end everything quickly because she is the Margrave, asking her not to take it personally. The tip of the blonde girl's staff begins to gather an immense amount of luminous energy that expands dangerously. From above, the blonde summons a massive pillar of holy light toward Revi, who just observes the attack descending in a calm, motionless way. The devastating beam of luminous energy drops at an extremely high speed against the redhead, who remains totally unfazed by the threat. Eldmia screams in complete despair for Revi to dodge that overwhelming attack coming her way already. A hexagonal pink magic barrier instantly activates around Revi, completely blocking the beam of holy light. Eldmia is totally in shock, seeing that she managed to contain a high-ranking magic. With such ease, Ethelua also widens her eyes in surprise, unable to believe her most powerful attack was nullified without any effort. On the balcony, Marquis Esdel leans forward astounded, recognizing the extremely high-level defense technique. The white-haired woman asks herself startled if the young Margrave truly cast that magic without needing to say a single word. Ethelua realizes she is no ordinary mage for using silent casting, and admits she truly lives up to the title of Margrave faced with this. The blonde decides she needs to change strategies and preps her staff to use an even stronger magic. She raises her staff and exclaims with determination that now she is also going to fight for real, summoning a gigantic golden magic circle in the air. Yahello casts the third-tier Holy Light magic, firing multiple glowing, swift beams against the opponent. Revi maintains her extremely calm, focused gaze, analyzing the trajectory of all the beams that rapidly approach. With precise movements, the redhead leaps backward elegantly, dodging the first impacts that explode on the arena floor. However, one of the magic beams curves in the air unexpectedly and charges directly toward the young Margrave. Revi reacts immediately and spins her reddish spear with extreme agility to block the precisely guided attack. The young girl's orange eyes glow with determination as she realizes the exact time has come to switch to the offense. Yahello recognizes her opponent's skill, but arrogantly states that the Margrave's road ends right there. A massive greenish sword of pure mana begins to materialize in the sky above the arena, glowing with overwhelming power. The blonde points her staff upward and invokes the Imperial Blood Contract ritual, calling the powerful Spear of the Throne. The gigantic weapon of greenish energy drops in a free fall with full force to crush the redhead in the center of the battlefield. Without showing any panic, Revi takes a deep breath and initiates her own counterattack, activating her family's contract ritual. She points her red weapon to the sky and invokes the legendary protection known as the Shield of the Anicap Kingdom. A massive pink shield of highly concentrated mana begins to form, before Revi to contain the gigantic weapon. A gigantic warrior in pinkish armor materializes behind Revi and uses his shield to block Yahello's massive Spear of the Throne. The hero of the Empire is left, completely jaw-dropped witnessing that impressive defense invocation on a colossal scale. Eldmia also stands perplexed and questions out loud what kind of extraordinary power that is that the young girl just invoked. Ragnall proudly smiles, commenting that the shield of the Anicap Kingdom is truly magnificent, leaving Eldmia confused beside him. The master explains that Revi's family has used an extraordinary defensive magic for generations to repel enemy invasions. Because of their great deeds, the family received the authority of Margrave and became known as the shield of the entire kingdom. The old man recalls that 10 years ago, Revi's father invited him to serve as a magic instructor and teach his beloved children. He shares that Revi was always an exceptional girl, with an incredible drive to evolve, and that he believed in her bright future. However, their territory was devastated by the Demon King's army, and not even the former Margrave managed to contain the terrible invasion. Upon receiving the news of the destruction, Ragnall felt an immense rage over his own helplessness and fell into despair, thinking it was the end. But his sorrowful look turns into a new hope upon seeing the persistence of the young girl who survived the tragedy. Seeing the girl return safely and bravely take on the important leadership as the new Margrave fills his heart with pride. The old master smiles and thinks that she became someone admirable because her steady stance now strongly resembles that of her late father. Eldmia observes the noblewoman with the sympathetic, serious face, finally understanding the full weight of the history she carries on her back. He recalls the moment he rescued her while she was tied up, watching him fight bravely against the demon beasts. On that occasion, she maintained an expression of extreme frustration for being unable to do anything but watch that violent combat. With this, the Prota clearly notices that he was not the only one there who desired with all their might to become stronger to protect. The imposing warrior in pinkish armor readies himself and steadily charges, wielding his shield to push back the opponent's attack in the arena with an overwhelming impact. Yahello's powerful spear is completely shattered by the mana giant's impenetrable barrier. Revi takes advantage of the broken enemy defense to immediately activate the counterattack phase of her family's contract ritual. The pink giant raises a solid sword in the air before Yahello, who watches paralyzed at the immense threat about to crash down on her. The blonde girl shakes with fear and desperately thinks that things should not have taken such a disastrous turn for her side. The giant delivers a devastating vertical strike with his massive mana sword, hitting the opponent's position dead on in the simulation. A huge cloud of dust spreads through the arena, while the pink warrior's projection slowly begins to dissolve in the air. The four-eyed assistant yells, startled, declaring an immediate end to the match to prevent any real injury from happening there. He formally announces Revi's victory, who smiles relieved and discreetly celebrates for managing to win the simulated duel. The mana, residues, and dust from the large impact begin to clear up on the side of the arena where the opponent was positioned. Yahello appears fallen on her back on the arena floor, staring at the ceiling totally in disbelief at being defeated so easily. The students in the bleachers mutter incredulously over the defeat of the Academy's best student, praising the Margrave's impressive strength. From the top of the balcony, the mysterious white-haired woman silently observes the arena, staring at the scene with apparent displeasure. She comments with contempt that that was foolish, and that is why the defeated opponent will never be more than a fourth princess. The woman questions the Marquise about what is going on there, since they told her the Margrave was not that strong, and he admits his surprise. Esdel comments that maybe this is the true strength of the Anicap Kingdom, which in the past once managed to fight toe-to-toe with the Empire. The young white-haired girl scoffs at the comment, saying that is just an old story with no relevance to today. She grips the balcony railing tightly and thinks to herself that the empire is supreme, with no nation that can equal them. She maintains her steady, imposing look, clearly annoyed by the distribution of forces of the foreign delegation in front of her. The young girl says she just had an interesting idea, immediately sparking Esdel's curiosity about what she is plotting. With a wicked smile, she suggests making the Margrave fight directly against the hero of the empire in the next simulation round. In the arena, Eldmia excitedly celebrates, congratulating Rivi on the fine victory. While she shyly smiles, satisfied with the result, Othelloa sits on the bench quite frustrated. In a low voice laments being defeated with such ease by her opponent. The hero of the empire laughs out loud at her defeat and boldly comments that the Margrave, besides being extremely beautiful, is very powerful and capable. The purple-haired elf questions him if that is a time to laugh, but he hits back saying he does not care since it is just a sparring match. An official approaches Sieg to whisper an urgent message, drawing the fellow's attention, who just grumbles with curiosity. Upon hearing what the official has to say, the hero of the empire changes his playful features to a tense face and asks what he said. Eldmia is caught off guard, hearing a loud shout coming from the direction of the combat arena, and immediately looks to try and understand the call. Sieg positions himself in the center of the arena, yelling toward the upper balcony for the person who is up there to show themselves already. The Marquis asks if Sieg needs anything, and the youth notices, surprised, that it is an important figure of the imperial nobility. Sieg points directly toward Rivi and loudly announces to everyone in the hall that he has zero interest in facing the Margrave Eldmia, and Ragnell get confused by the hero's rash attitude and wonder what he is trying to propose with that announcement. The Marquis questions him, reminding him that he always wishes to face strong opponents, and that he just saw Rivi's excellent magic display. Sieg admits her defense spell looked very pretty to see from the outside. While Othelloa remains down listening to the conversation, he adds with disdain that her skill was just something flashy, but without any real combat utility against him. He explains that that giant invocation is inefficient for wasting too much energy to maintain an unnecessary shape. Besides being very slow, Sieg consoles Othelloa, saying she only lost due to getting intimidated by the size, but that the Margrave is not strong enough to hold him back. The red-haired boy asks if Rivi agrees, and she ironically replies, apologizing for not meeting his expectations. Sieg says there is no need for apologies, but warns that if she truly insists on conducting a match against someone from the academy, he reveals his true intention, saying that in reality, he would like to face her young personal bodyguard who is standing right there. He questions the Marquis about the plan, and the noble answers that if the Margrave agrees, there will be no problem having a representative in her place. Sieg calls Eldmia to the match and provokingly asks if he is going to run, or if he wants to continue that tense conversation from earlier. Revi notices they do not intend to back down at all with that direct provocation, and Eldmia coldly agrees with her realization. Rivi thinks they are determined to crush them either way, and notices that friendly Marquis is actually a great manipulator. Rivi questions him about what he will do since they will not accept a refusal, and Eldmia answers, prepping himself, that he will do whatever it takes. Eldmia walks determinedly toward the arena, thinking to himself that he is going to teach them what happens when they make him truly angry. He accepts the challenge directly, and Sieg excitedly celebrates with the confirmation that he will finally have his desired duel. The hero of the empire cracks an insane, terrifying smile, silently thinking about how that simulated match is going to be extremely fun. The Marquis comments on the balcony that everything occurred according to her predictions, and the young girl says dealing with that idiot is nothing new to her. She adds that Sieg looked very interested in the bodyguard since the argument from earlier and would never let this chance slide. Esdel questions if there is any real value in making the hero fight a bodyguard instead of directly facing the Margrave as planned. The white-haired girl mockingly smiles and just answers that, at the end of the day, the hero himself decided to act on his own in the duel. She coldly explains that the device gathers physical damage and does not completely nullify it if a blow is way too devastating all at once. Esdel gets thoughtful about the danger and mutters that someone capable of inflicting such massive damage in a simulated fight could only be. The young girl says only the hero possesses such strength and reminds him of the terrible fate of the vice-captain who fought him, making the fellow feared by all. The Marquis questions if he would use so much force on a mere guard, but she claims the great interest shown by Sieg is already a win. She cruelly hopes that, at best, the young guard loses just an arm or leg, returning completely demoralized to the kingdom. The girl finds the situation pitiful for him, trying to please his master, and with disdain thinks the foreign fellow chose the worst possible opponent. The two adversaries finally position themselves across from each other in the center of the simulated arena. Under Master Ragnall's tracking gaze, Ragnall observes the start of that imminent, dangerous match with an extremely focused, serious look, fearing for the possible consequences. He indignantly thinks that the petty intentions of the nobles on the balcony are way too obvious, but guarantees nothing will go as they planned today. Ragnall loudly announces that the simulated battle is about to begin and orders Eldmia and Siegfried to generate their virtual weapons. Revi tells him to visualize the desired weapon and slowly close his hand, and Eldmia begins to concentrate on his goal. Eldmia's hand begins to glow intensely with blue mana particles that cluster together very rapidly. He stands quite surprised and satisfied to see that he managed to successfully materialize a beautiful glowing blue sword in his fist. Suddenly, Eldmia notices something strange in his adversary's stance and grumbles, puzzled by the hero's reaction. Siegfried also begins to concentrate, generating a massive amount of reddish energy around his raised hands. The hero materializes a colossal sword of energy that radiates an overwhelming, intimidating aura throughout the training hall. His mocking look gives way to a cold, murderous expression, showing he does not plan on holding back in that simulation duel. Eldmia breaks into a cold sweat but maintains the smile, thinking to himself that his opponent is truly a complete battle lunatic. The Proto notices the hero, glares fixedly at him, as if he just found a new, fun toy to tear apart. Ragnall drops his hand with force in the air and gives the authoritative initial command for the two to start fighting immediately. With astonishing speed, Siegfried charges against the adversary, leaving a trail of dust and wind behind with the foot's thrust. He moves so fast that he seems to vanish from where he was, catching Eldmia off guard with that incredible speed. The Proto looks startled around the arena, trying to track the enemy's movements and wonders if he simply vanished into thin air. Suddenly, Siegfried appears flying in the air directly above Eldmia, getting ready to deliver a lethal strike coming from above. Eldmia reacts out of pure instinct and raises his blue sword in time to block the hero's violent downward sword impact. Siegfried opens a wide, satisfied smile and comments that his instincts about the adversary's strength truly were not wrong. He praises Eldmia's impressive strength while putting even more physical pressure onto the youth's sword, who resists with difficulty. Intense mana sparks fly everywhere due to the massive friction and force applied by the two fighters' blades. Laughing uncontrollably, the hero backs off and says it has been a long time since he found someone capable of stopping his sword with such ease. He charges again, delivering frantic blows, and mockingly asks what the bodyguard will do against that sequence of attacks. Sieg advances in the fight and crazily yells for Eldmia to try and stop his new sword strike of enormous power. He yells insanely, demanding that his opponent entertain him even more in that incredible, violent simulation match. Eldmia blocks the terrible sword strike by a very narrow margin, letting out a groan of pain due to the tremendous force of the impact on his arms. Eldmia asks himself, startled what kind of combat style that is, because the opponent brands his weapon in a completely reckless manner. He tries to decipher the hero's technique, realizing that although he seems to just wildly swing the sword, there is something very unusual. Even looking like disordered, crazy attacks, the Proto anxiously notices he cannot find even a single opening in the defense. The two continue to trade fast blows, but Siegfried's overwhelming pressure begins to push Eldmia back step by step. The hero of the Empire masterfully spins his body in the air, executing multiple consecutive cuts to break his opponent's guard. With an extremely aggressive face, he delivers a violent downward attack with the goal of wrapping up the clash at once. Eldmia grits his teeth and exerts himself to the max to hold the devastating impact. Concentrating all his pure blue mana on the blade, Marquis Esdil closely tracks that tight battle from the hall's balcony, analyzing each movement of the two young prodigies. The noble comments that the hero's strength is truly overwhelming, and the white-haired princess says they spent a fortune on him. However, her mocking expression subtly changes when she notices something strange is happening in that fight. She notices the young guard has only defended himself since the start of the fight, yet still manages to bravely resist all the blows. Intrigued by such physical resistance and dexterity, the young girl seriously asks herself who that mysterious bodyguard truly is. Revi watches the clash with great apprehension and worry, fearing for Eldmia's safety before the Imperial hero's brutality. She whispers the youth's name in a low voice with a quite tense face, silently rooting for him to manage to hold out firm. Siegfried leaps very high in the air, getting ready to deliver an overwhelming kick strike directly against the adversary's guard. He hits Eldmia's sword square on with his swift kick, forcing him to defend with all the strength he has left in his arms. Right after, Siegfried very quickly changes his movement in the air, prepping his gigantic sword for a surprise blow. He furiously yells, accusing the opponent of underestimating his strength by only passively defending during the entire duel. Eldmia activates his concentrated strength to deliver an upward diagonal cut and thus create an opening in the adversary's movement. The Proto is shocked when he notices that at the last instant, the hero of the Empire managed to completely alter his trajectory in the air. Siegfried delivers a violent kick against Eldmia's chest, who curses in pain upon getting hit square on by the unforeseen blow. The impact launches Eldmia back at high speed, making him violently crash against the training hall's wall. Revi and the old master Ragnall stand completely in shock, witnessing the violence of that brutal blow delivered by the hero on the upper balcony. The wicked white-haired girl celebrates the victory with a sadistic smile, and satisfied thinks the hero managed it. In the middle of the debris and dust from the collision, the Prota appears fallen on the floor, motionless and with his head down. After taking the impact, Siegfried walks over laughing and asks if he is fine, mockingly apologizing for getting a bit carried away, and missing the dose of force. Ragnall takes a step forward, declaring the training is over, but a voice coming from the floor immediately asks him to wait. Rivi lookingly fixates on the master and categorically states that the match has not reached its end yet. Ragnall turns surprised by the comment. While Rivi keeps saying that the Eldmia she knows would never be defeated like that, Eldmia firmly rests his hand on his knee and begins to slowly rise from the middle of all the dust and debris. She completes her thought, stating with absolute conviction that her young protector would never fall so easily in battle. Siegfried smiles impressed, seeing the fellow manage to get up from that strong blow, and praises his excellent physical resistance. Eldmia just calmly cleans the dust off his clothes and ironically thanks the hero for the free compliment. From the hall's upper balcony, the white-haired girl tracks everything up close with an extremely focused, attentive face. She gets deeply irritated by Siegfried's delay and angrily thinks he should just quickly wrap up that duel instead of hesitating. Squeezing the railing with force, she crossly grumbles that is definitely not the proper time to stay chatting in the arena. Siegfried yawns and suggests closing it there, confessing he is a bit disappointed with the fellow for only defending the entire time. Eldmia mysteriously smiles and asks if he truly thinks that. Completing right after that, the time to play is over for the both of them. He firmly warns that he already managed to understand his opponent's skill pattern and mockingly announces that now it will be his turn. Siegfried focuses his serious, threatening look on the opponent, surprised by that bold declaration said by the foreign bodyguard. The hero ironically asks himself how the opponent claims to have deciphered his techniques when he spent the whole fight just dodging. Thinking the opponent is all talk, the hero preps himself. While Eldmia takes a step forward wrapped in a dangerous blue mana energy, Eldmia moves so fast that he instantly vanishes, generating a loud bang that echoes through the entire training arena. In the exact same millisecond, the Prota appears by surprise right behind Siegfried, delivering a swift attack with his blue sword. The hero of the Empire widens his eyes in complete panic over the opponent's absurd agility, unable to believe what he is seeing. Siegfried manages to spin his body out of pure reflex and blocks the surprise cut with extreme difficulty, gritting his teeth with the pressure. Taking advantage of the momentum, Eldmia agilely leaps backward to reposition himself in the air and get ready for an immediate new sword strike. Siegfried remains totally static and in shock, unable to track the unbelievable speed of the young guard's movements. Eldmia executes multiple zigzag movements at an extremely high speed, leaving only glowing blue trails across the arena floor. The hero desperately tries to track the opponent, but finds himself completely surrounded by intense beams of blue light in all directions. He astoundedly thinks the opponent is way too fast and wonders how the fellow managed to hide such an absurd speed level like that. Eldmia re-emerges agilely right above Siegfried, descending with his blue sword wielded to deliver a lethal top-down blow. However, the hero quickly recovers his composure and cracks a confident smile as he preps to counterattack the aerial strike. Siegfried delivers a devastating upward cut and confidently yells that the opponent's attacking intentions are completely obvious. The simulation mana blades of the two young duelists clash again in the air, generating a sharp sound that resounds through the hall. However, at the instant of the impact, Siegfried widens his eyes in surprise, noticing something very out of the ordinary is happening there. The hero realizes the fellow never had the intention to use the sword for real and used the weapon only as a perfect distraction. The true target of Eldmia's strike is the face of the Imperial hero himself, who watches paralyzed as the clenched fist rapidly approaches. On the balcony, the Marquis comments that the hero is truly overwhelming, and the white-haired princess agrees. Recalling the huge investment in him, Siegfried is hit square on by the punch and ends up violently blasted back. Skidding across the simulation arena floor, Revi and Ragnall watch the scene open-mouthed, unable to believe the young guard managed to deliver a clean blow directly to the hero Yahello, and the purple-haired elf are left completely speechless by the sudden event, widening their eyes in shock. All the other Imperial students in the bleachers stare at the scene with expressions of extreme amazement and disbelief over the twist. Esdel and the white-haired princess also stand frozen by the unprecedented scene, staring at the arena with expressions of pure astonishment. The young noblewoman asks herself in complete despair and mental indignation if the Imperial hero truly just received a direct blow like that. Siegfried wipes his face with a sarcastic smile of satisfaction and admits the opponent was not just all talk, confessing to be impressed. The Prota maintains his defensive stance, while the hero wonders if the fellow was capable of reading all his movements in such a short time. Siegfried laughs in a quite psychotic way and comments with insane enthusiasm that it had been a long time since he felt so motivated in a fight. He holds the handle of his monumental sword and takes back what he said about losing interest, concentrating his immense simulation mana. The hero insanely yells that Eldmia is by far the most interesting person he has ever met in his entire life as a fighter. With a renewed murderous momentum, Siegfried fiercely charges, delivering a violent downward attack against the prota's position. Eldmia dodges the first attack with extreme precision and elegance, spinning his body to the side to quickly reposition. The two young warriors go back to trading fast. Brutal blows in the center of the simulation arena, generating an extremely tight combat. Siegfried displays a face gripped by battle madness, delivering increasingly intense and fast blows with his gigantic weapon. Eldmia blocks the heavy rushes with massive effort, feeling the absurd weight of each sword impact delivered by his adversary. The violent clash between the two continues to generate immense shockwaves and energy rings that spread with full force throughout the hall. Eldmia breaks into a cold sweat before that monstrous, absurd strength, noticing the hero is brandishing two gigantic swords as if they were light toys. The violent downward blow of one of the colossal swords kicks up dust and destroys the arena floor. While the youth manages to dodge in the air, Siegfried stands quite surprised by the quick reflex and agility of the opponent, who managed to escape his heavy rush once again. Eldmia takes a safe distance from his opponent upon landing on the other side of the training hall to catch the necessary breath. The prota internally acknowledges that facing him head-on is way too dangerous, and decides he must maintain distance until he finds some opening. Suddenly, Siegfried's feet begin to be wrapped by an intense golden flame while he preps for one more relentless charge. A golden line of energy rapidly crosses the entire floor toward the youth, signaling a swift, overwhelming attack coming from the hero. Eldmia immediately widens his eyes, noticing the imminent danger of that glowing technique approaching at an extremely high speed. The prota stands astounded to see that the hero managed to instantly close in on him and wonders how he can be so. Fast Siegfried crazily laughs and yells for Eldmia to not think he is the only one capable of using the aura's devastating power in combat. He delivers a brutal sword strike loaded with pure energy, which Eldmia exerts himself to the max to block with his bluish simulation weapon. The colossal impact between the swords triggers a series of violent dust and debris explosions throughout the battlefield's perimeter. Eldmia feels the terrible weight of the attack and grits his teeth in fatigue. Doing everything to not give in to the immense pressure applied against him, Siegfried backs off, taking a leap in the air to charge even more energy into his two colossal swords for the final rush. Eldmia goes rigid with worry and internally curses, questioning if his defense strategy ended up becoming a failure. A deafening clash of opposing energies occurs in the air with great violence, illuminating the entire hall with blue and golden beams. The two combatants land in the arena with great impact, dragging their feet on the floor while trying to quickly recover balance. Ragnall thinks Eldmia exceeded all expectations with his incredible dexterity, but acknowledges that the hero's strength is simply overwhelming. Ravi apprehensively observes, thinking that even reading all movements, Eldmia is being crushed by brutal force. With no chance to counterattack, Eldmia lets out a defying smile, and with frustration wonders if, at the end of the day, that lunatic adversary is still way above him. The youth feels the terrible sensation of oppression and recalls that that feeling of being about to be crushed is equal to what he felt against the demons. He takes a deep breath and decides he needs to react either way, squeezing with even more force the handle of his bluish simulation sword. Eldmia's eyes glow with blue sparks of pure concentrated mana, and he yells with fierce determination that he has already made his final decision. Siegfried stands momentarily surprised, noticing the sudden change of attitude and the electrical aura that begins to radiate from his adversary. Bluish sparks of pure, violent mana begin to intensely crackle around Eldmia's entire body, drastically increasing his power. He assumes an imposing, focused combat stance, channeling all that raw, destructive energy directly into his sword of light. Eldmia yells that now he is going to fight with everything, provoking a burst of laughter of pure satisfaction and madness from the Imperial hero. Sieg senses the danger in the air, thinking that every nerve of his body is alert, and noticing that colossal energy is no ordinary warrior aura. The hero raises his immense golden sword, thinking to himself that that detail holds zero importance before such a fun combat. He insanely states that the most important thing of all is that that thrilling, violent match continues to entertain him to the max. Ragnall falls into despair, seeing the hero completely lost his composure and is applying real aura to his virtual simulation weapons. The old master alarmedly warns that the match is over due to the danger of severe injuries and kneels down to deactivate the simulation barrier, but it is already too late because the two youths charge at the same time for the final clash, leaving trails of golden and blue light across the arena. Siegfried fiercely advances through the air with his immense swords raised. Wanting to crush Eldmia's defense with all the power of his imperial aura, Ragnall manages to activate a safety device on the arena floor, which emits a bluish glow to try and block the dangerous final impact. The overwhelming final clash between the two immense mana forces occurs exactly over the containment barrier newly activated by the master. A massive barrier in the form of a translucent blue pillar rises from the floor with great speed to separate the two young combatants for good. The two duelists are forced to sharply back off upon clashing against the impenetrable safety magic barrier raised in the center. A colossal explosion of mixed blue and golden mana energy occurs in the arena due to the violent interruption of the match by the instructors. Days later, at the prestigious Imperial Senate, the news about the controversial tie result of the simulated duel echoes intensely. An official furiously complains about the hero tying with a mere bodyguard, but the assistant explains that Ragnall stopped the fight in time. The officials try to prevent the intel from leaking to other kingdoms, but the subordinate anxiously reveals that the rumors have already spread. One of the generals laments the situation, saying he always warned that public training was unnecessary and fears the damage to the Empire's reputation. He directly blames the princess's haste for the disastrous results, reminding everyone that the hero is still not fully trained. The older official seriously asks what the Imperial princess is doing before all this crisis, leaving the subordinate nervous. The four-eyed fellow reveals that she simply locked herself in her luxurious personal office since the end of the fight and has not come out for anything. Inside the luxurious private room, the young princess slams the wooden desk with extreme force, ranting in anger about the foreign delegation. She curses the foreign kingdom's nobles with hatred and complains about how such a small nation went so far just to manage to protect their pride. Furious, she rants that her meticulous plan of years was ruined exactly when she had finally managed to manipulate the naive hero. She irritably notices that the tie will cause the other foreign nations to heavily suspect the hero's true capability. The princess rests her head on the desk, frustrated, and wonders where she messed up or if she ended up rushing things before the hero was ready. She irritably concludes that the hero is already strong enough to be sent directly to the battlefield at any moment. The young girl notices that the true trouble of that whole ruined plan is actually that cursed fellow named Eldmia Iga. She complains about how a random nobody was capable of fighting toe-to-toe against the hero and completely ruining her plan. Squeezing the railing with force, she crossly grumbles that is definitely not the proper time to stay chatting in the arena. With a wicked smile, she plans to make it so Eldmia is also held severely responsible for that match's outcome. She immediately orders them to prep a carriage because she will make it a point to personally go meet Eldmia to sort that out. Meanwhile, Eldmia appears locked behind the bars of a dark Imperial prison cell, patiently awaiting his fate. The Proto hears footsteps approaching and raises his head with a serious, focused look toward his cell's entrance in the dungeon. In another spot of the palace, at the Imperial Inn, some nobles begin to curiously gossip about the recent events. One of them comments having heard that a mere guard from Idisiel faced the hero toe-to-toe, and the other confirms having already heard the rumor. Zagnera scoffs, saying the hero did not even beat a guard, and that the rumors of demon invasion and divine oracle must be just political lies. Paynelson questions why they rushed the fight, if the official day to prove the hero's divine oracle would only be next. Weak Bolton says they thought of using Idisiel as an easy opponent to display the hero's strength, but their plan went sideways in spectacular fashion. They wonder about Eldmia's whereabouts, and one of the representatives says he knows exactly what happened to the fellow after the match. He reports that, right after the abrupt interruption of that tight simulated battle by the Imperial Academy's instructors, Eldmia ended up falling exhausted on the arena's stone floor due to the enormous physical effort of his match against the Imperial hero. While trying to recover on the floor, the youth was caught off guard, being quickly surrounded by several armed guards of the Empire itself. The noble reveals that the fellow ended up arrested by the Imperial soldiers under a heavy charge and was immediately tossed into the palace dungeon. Zagnera finds the attitude pathetic, but says it does not surprise him, because since the Emperor's death, the government has been under the command of the first princess, Esmue. He scoffs at the regent, saying that even destined to be empress, she gets carried away by emotions and still acts like she is a child. Bolton asks what they will do now, and Zagnera opines that they will pretend nothing happened and proceed with the plan. Although everything already looks like an obvious sham, he states with a dark smile that everyone came solely to exploit the Empire's obvious weakness and shake its power structure. He turns back, calling for an assassin named Sapira, and directly asks if she will be capable of fulfilling the designated mission. With extreme skill, Sapira spins her sharp dagger between her fingers, proving to be perfectly prepped for the assassination task. Displaying a quite confident, dangerous smile, the beautiful assassin just shortly answers for him to leave everything to her. Back at the Imperial Palace prison, two heavily armed guards continue on standby, guarding the entrance of Eldmia's cell. The sound of steady, calm footsteps echoes down the long, cold stone hallway of the dungeon. Breaking the absolute silence that hung in the place, Eldmia appears with his hands trapped in wooden cuffs and gets startled by surprise, hearing a familiar voice say he looks calmer. The youth notices the visitor is Marquise Esdel, who smiles on the other side of the bars and asks for the two to have a brief talk in private. Eldmia angrily gets up and accuses him of having staged that fight against the hero on purpose, just to create a pretext and keep him hostage. Esdel asks him to not misunderstand, claiming everything that happened was his fault for trying to truly assassinate the hero of the Empire. Eldmia angrily denies the accusation, recalling they told him the simulation device only generated harmless illusions to the users. The Marquis patiently explains that the simulation device reads the user's own skills just to materialize weapons and spells. However, he clarifies that the aura is different because it directly strengthens the body physically, affecting the reality of the real world. The youth barks, saying that should have been warned beforehand, but the Marquis calmly answers that using the aura itself was not the problem there. The noble explains that the use of the aura is even encouraged to simulate the tension of a real fight, but points out that the true trouble was something else. He seriously reveals that Eldmia ended up directly coating his virtual simulation blade with his dangerous blue aura energy. Eldmia sees no issue in that and questions him on what is wrong, but the Marquis asks back if he did not attend his kingdom's academy. Esdel lets out a long sigh and comments surprised on how a prominent bodyguard of the Margrave does not know such a basic concept of magic. He explains that unlike the free flow of mana, the aura binds to the user's physical body to amplify it in an entirely direct way. The noble clarifies that extending the aura beyond one's own physical body to coat a weapon is something very difficult that only grandmasters achieve. He says that by imbuing an illusory weapon with the real aura, it gains the same power to end a life as a real one, completely nullifying the training's safety. Eldmia silently realizes that coating a weapon with simple mana is very easy, but applying concentrated aura is something of a totally different level. Esdel states that even if it was out of ignorance and lack of magic education, he put the hero's life at risk, and that is why he needed to be locked up. Eldmia demands to know if Revi is safe under threat, and the Marquis asks him to calm down, guaranteeing she is fine from being protected by Ragnall. The noble reveals they know his punch would not end the hero, even if it hit square on for real, making the youth question the reason for the arrest. He explains that through Eldmia's fault, the Empire's political plans were ruined, and seriously demands that he take full responsibility. Eldmia is shocked by the demand for responsibility, and Esdel clearly says he wants the fellow to start cooperating and working for the Empire. Eldmia angrily turns down the outrageous offer, but the Marquis answers smilingly that he is free to refuse if he prefers to rot in the cell forever. The Marquis asks him to remember that by cooperating with the Empire, he will have the chance to directly save the kingdom of Ediciel. Esdel backs away, saying for him to think well before his return, leaving Eldmia desperate behind the bars, demanding answers about the kingdom. The Prota gets extremely confused and anxiously asks himself what the noble meant by the claim of saving his kingdom. In another wing of the lavish palace, an urgent call demands Marquis Esdel's immediate presence to deal with a new important matter. Revi argues with a guard, insisting she will personally speak with the Marquis to clarify that everything was nothing more than a misunderstanding. Suddenly, the red-haired noblewoman cuts off her argument with the guard upon noticing the silent, unexpected approach of the young Yahello. Yahello friendly smiles and tries to reassure the Margrave, stating that now everything is already perfectly well resolved for them. The blonde gently asks the Margrave to accompany her, leaving the young redhead quite curious and confused by that sudden invitation. Back in the cold dungeon cell, Eldmia remains sitting on the damp floor trying to digest the mysterious words said by the Marquis. He raises his confused look upon noticing a new visitor before his bars, and astounded asks the reason for that person being there. Siegfried ignores the guard and forcefully squeezes his wrist until making him shout in pain, saying he goes wherever he wants and ordering him to get out of the way. Eldmia watches that bizarre scene with an expression of complete astonishment, failing to understand the Imperial hero's aggressive, rebellious behavior. With total calm, Siegfried inserts the golden key he took from the guard and opens the iron lock of Eldmia's cell at once. He makes a casual nod with his head, calling the young foreign prisoner to leave his prison without any worry. Eldmia rises with quite a bit of suspicion, keeping his guard up before that unbelievable, liberating attitude coming from his opponent. A short time later, the scene shifts to a busy, rustic local tavern situated in the vicinity of the Empire's capital. Siegfried calmly enters the establishment with his hands behind his head, while Eldmia closely follows him. Still quite intrigued, Revi happily waves upon seeing the fellow enter, leaving him extremely relieved to confirm up close that his ward is safe and sound there, sitting down before a hearty table full of food. The hostess asks for sincere apologies for the fact that things took that tense turn. Yahello formally introduces herself as the fourth princess of the Ashnoa Empire and one of hero Siegfried's official journey companions. Revi is astounded to learn of her nobility, and Eldmia questions why a princess would help them, while she says she has a favor to ask of everyone. With a serious, focused look, the blonde directly asks for them to help her stop the political ambitions of the first princess. Esmue Revi repeats those words surprised and apprehensive, realizing the gravity of their involvement in a succession dispute of the imperial court. Yahello explains that her older sister ended the succession wars and today rules the empire as the de facto leader, controlling everything strictly. Revi asks if she is planning a rebellion, but Yahello denies it, saying she has no political talent and already gave up on the throne dispute a long time ago. The young blonde lowers her gaze with sadness and honestly confesses she is acting this way solely out of being extremely worried about the Empire. She begins to detail that from a certain point in the past, her older sister and ruler of the Empire began to subtly change. She heavily reveals that Esmu simply ceased to be the affectionate sister she knew, becoming someone cold and obsessed with absolute control. The memory of her older sister's ambitious, dark face still causes massive distress in the chest of the young exiled princess of Ishnoa. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Princess Esmu discovers the breakout and furiously screams at her soldiers to recapture Eldmia by any means necessary. Hey, and while we're talking about capturing things, let's capture those slackers who watch the videos but don't drop a like or leave a comment below.